The wind in stunning, violent bursts tore across the plains of Wyoming, carrying enough grit to scour the paint off a wagon wheel. It was a hateful wind, the kind that found the seams in a coat and the cracks in a spirit. When the stagecoach finally lurched to a halt in front of the Red Creek Depot, the leather thoroughbraces groaned like dying animals. The door swung open. A boot struck the dust, then another, and then Ingrid Halvorsen rose from the cramped interior, unfolding herself like a carpenter's rule that had been bent too long. She kept rising. The men loitering on the boardwalk stopped their chewing. A woman sweeping the dust in front of the dry goods store paused, her broom hovering inches above the planks. Ingrid felt the silence before she saw the faces. It was a familiar weight, heavy and suffocating. She stepped down, her boots sinking into the dry earth. She wore a blue calico dress borrowed from a cousin in Chicago, a garment sewn for a woman of average stature. On Ingrid, the cuffs rode 3 inches above her wrists, and the shoulders were so tight the fabric whispered a warning every time she moved her arms. She stood 6 feet and 4 inches tall in her stocking feet. In her boots, she towered over the stage driver, a gnarled man who looked at her with a mixture of pity and relief that she was no longer his cargo. Ingrid kept her eyes on the horizon, refusing to look at the people gathering. She had learned long ago that if she looked them in the eye, they took it as an invitation to comment. "That is a big woman," she heard a man mutter. "That is a giant," a child whispered, the voice carrying on the wind. Ingrid gripped her single carpet bag until her knuckles turned white. She was here for Elias Rourke. He was a homesteader with a claim near the creek, a man who had written letters in a cramped, shaky hand asking for a wife who was strong enough to work and quiet enough to let a man think. She was both. She had come to save her family back east, where the city air was full of coal smoke and hunger, but mostly she had come to find a place where there was enough empty space that perhaps people would stop looking at her. "Excuse me," Ingrid said to the driver. Her voice was low, rolling with the cadence of the Scandinavian North. "I am looking for Mr. Elias Rourke." The driver spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. He looked at the station master, then back at Ingrid. He took off his hat and rubbed a bald spot on his head. "Ma'am," the driver said, "I reckon you did not get the wire in Omaha." Ingrid felt a cold stone drop in her stomach. "What wire?" Elias Rourke passed. The driver said, 3 days ago. Heart gave out while he was fencing the south quarter, dropped right there in the grass." The world tilted slightly. Ingrid did not sway, for she was built like a pine tree. But inside, the ground vanished. She had a grand total of $4.12 in a handkerchief pinned inside her corset. She had a one-way ticket. She had a family waiting for money she was supposed to send once she was settled. "Passed," Ingrid repeated. "Buried him yesterday," a new voice said. Ingrid turned. A man in a black frock coat approached, clutching a Bible like a shield. He had the soft hands of a man who did not work the soil. "I am Reverend Miller," the man said. "A terrible tragedy. Elias was a good man, though quiet. We are deeply sorry for your loss." "Miss Halvorsen," Ingrid said, "but I am not his widow. We were not yet wed." The crowd murmured. This changed things. A widow had rights. A mail-order bride who arrived too late was just a stray dog that needed feeding. "Then what is to be done with her?" a woman called out from the mercantile porch. "She cannot stay at the bachelor quarters." Ingrid felt the heat rising in her neck. She was 24 years old, but in this moment, under the scrutiny of 50 eyes, she felt like the child she had once been, standing on a crate in a carnival tent while men paid a nickel to see the Nordic giantess. "I will need a place to sleep," Ingrid said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Just for tonight. I can work. I am strong." The Reverend looked uncomfortable. "The boarding house is full, save for the kitchen pantry. I will take it," Ingrid said. Before she could move, the crowd parted. A man walked through, the silver star on his vest catching the harsh sunlight. Sheriff Wade Harlan was a man of average height but possessed a density that made him seem immovable. He had eyes like polished agates, hard and unreadable. He looked Ingrid up and down, not with the gawking curiosity of the others, but with the appraising stare of a man counting livestock. Miss Halvorson, the sheriff said. I am Sheriff Harlan. You are a complication. I did not intend to be, Ingrid said. Intention does not change the fact, Harlan said. Rourke left no will. His claim is up in the air. You have no legal standing here. I just need a room, Ingrid said. For now, Harlan said. But a woman alone, especially one of your particular carriage, attracts attention. This is a rough town. Unattached women are viewed as either prey or property. I would suggest you find a solution quickly, or a train ticket back east. I cannot go back, Ingrid said. The words came out before she could stop them. Harlan smiled, and it did not reach his eyes. Then you had best be cooperative. I like a quiet town. Ingrid walked to the boarding house, the crowd parting around her as if she carried a plague. She felt their eyes on her back, measuring the width of her shoulders, the length of her stride. She ducked her head to enter the doorway, a habit ingrained in her bones. Inside, the air smelled of stale beer and frying grease. The landlady, a sour-faced woman named Mrs. Gable, pointed her to a cot set up in the back of the kitchen, between a sack of potatoes and the wood box. It is $2 a week. Mrs. Gable said, meals extra. Ingrid sat on the narrow cot. It creaked in protest. She placed her bag on the floor and stared at her hands. They were large hands, capable of lifting a cast-iron stove. But now they trembled. Through the thin wall, she could hear the saloon next door, piano music, shouting, and then laughter. Sharp, raucous laughter. It pulled her back. She closed her eyes and saw the canvas tent. She smelled the sawdust. She heard the barker's voice. Step right up. See the Amazon of the North, a monstrosity of nature. She remembered the man who used to poke her leg with a cane to make sure she was real. She remembered the shame, hot and acidic, burning her throat. She lay down, curling her legs up to fit on the mattress. She was alone in a town that did not want her, promised to a dead man, with a sheriff who looked at her like a problem to be solved. 2 hours later, Cole Mercer rode into town. He came from the north, driving a small herd of 20 steers toward the railhead. He rode a dun gelding that looked as tired as he felt. Cole was a man built of wire and scar tissue, his face weathered by sun and silence. He wore a hat that had lost its shape 3 years ago and a coat that had been mended more times than it had been washed. He kept his head down. He did not look at the faces on the boardwalk. He did not check to see who was sitting on the saloon porch. He rode directly to the stockyards, his movements efficient and economical. He negotiated the price for the steers with the station agent, accepting a lower rate because he did not have the energy to argue. He took the money in greenbacks and silver, counting it twice. He owed no man a debt, and he intended to keep it that way. Cole walked toward the general store to buy supplies. He needed coffee, flour, and ammunition. He walked with a slight limp in his left leg, a souvenir from a horse wreck in the Dakota Territory. He was 32 years old, but his eyes were ancient. He had a history that he kept folded tight inside his chest, a violent past he refused to defend and refused to speak of. He saw the commotion near the water trough, a group of ranch hands, fresh from a payout and drunk on cheap whiskey, had formed a semicircle. In the center stood a woman. Cole stopped. He had seen tall women before, but this woman was a pillar. She stood with her back against the rough wood of the livery stable wall. She held a basket of laundry against her chest like a shield. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and fixed on the ground. One of the men, a thick-necked drifter Cole recognized as a troublemaker named Dannon, stepped closer to her. Look at the size of her. Dannon slurped, waving a bottle. I bet she is big enough to break a man in half, or maybe hold him so tight he pops. The other men laughed. It was an ugly sound. Ingrid did not move. She did not speak. She was frozen. It was not weakness that held her still. It was the trap of memory. If she fought, they would call her a monster. If she ran, they would chase. So she stood, turning to stone, hoping they would lose interest. Come on, giant, Dannon said, reaching out to touch the fabric of her sleeve. Let us see if you are woman all the way down." Cole moved. He did not shout. He did not draw the Colt peacemaker that sat on his hip. He simply stepped between the drunk and the woman. He moved with a fluid, quiet speed that made the air seem to change pressure. Cole placed a hand on Dannon's chest. It was not a shove, but a stop. "That is enough," Cole said. His voice was low, rasping like dry leaves over gravel. Dannon blinked, looking at the hand on his chest. Then up at Cole. "Who are you? Someone who wants to get his coffee and leave." Cole said, "You are drunk, Dannon. Go sleep it off." Dannon bristled. His pride stung in front of his friends. "You protecting the freak? Mercer? I heard you liked strange things." Cole did not flinch. He did not look at Ingrid. He kept his eyes locked on Dannon. "She is a lady," Cole said, "and you are blocking the street." Dannon clenched his fist. Cole shifted his weight, his hand dropping casually near his holster. He did not threaten. He simply made it clear that violence was a language he spoke fluently, and he was ready to have a conversation if Dannon insisted. The tension held for 3 seconds. Then Dannon spat on the ground, missing Cole's boot by an inch. "She ain't worth the bullet," Dannon muttered. He turned and stumbled away, his friends following like sheep. Cole waited until they were around the corner. Then he turned to Ingrid. He stepped back, giving her 4 feet of space. He did not reach out to steady her. He did not try to touch her arm. "Are you all right?" he asked. Ingrid looked at him. She saw a man with sad eyes and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. She noticed immediately that he was not crowding her. Every other man she had met tried to get close, to measure themselves against her height. Cole stood back. "I am fine." Ingrid lied. Her voice shook. "You are shaking," Cole observed. "I'm angry," she said, clutching the laundry basket. Cole nodded. "You have the right to be." "Thank you," she said stiffly. "You did not have to do that. I did," Cole said. He tipped the brim of his hat. It was a polite gesture, but distant. Ingrid watched him walk away. He moved like a man trying to leave no tracks. The next day, the reality of her situation tightened like a noose. Ingrid sat in the parlor of the boarding house, her knees bumping against the low tea table. Mrs. Gable had suggested she could work off her lodging by doing laundry for the miners and drovers. But when Ingrid had tried to walk to the creek with the baskets, the stairs had been unbearable. She had returned, humiliated, her hands trembling so badly she had dropped the soap. Sheriff Harlan found her there. He closed the door behind him, cutting off the noise from the street. "Miss Halvorson," Harlan said, sitting opposite her, "we need to discuss the Rourke claim." "I was told I have no claim," Ingrid said. "You do not," Harlan agreed, "but you are the closest thing to a relative he has in this county. Now, listen to me. That land is situated on Red Creek. It has water. There is a man, Silas Brand. You have heard the name?" Ingrid shook her head. "He is the cattle baron of this territory," Harlan said. "He owns the valley. He wants that water. What does this have to do with me?" Harlan leaned forward. "The town wants this settled. Brand wants the land. If you were to facilitate the transfer, simply sign a statement saying Rourke intended to sell to Brand, I could ensure you have enough money for a ticket to San Francisco or New York. Anywhere but here." "You want me to lie?" Ingrid asked. "I want you to be practical," Harlan said. His voice dropped, becoming harder. "And I want you to be safe. A woman like you stick out. People get ideas. Accidents happen to those who are stubborn." Ingrid felt the cold prickle of fear. He was threatening her. It was wrapped in concern, but it was a threat. "I do not know the law," Ingrid whispered. "I am the law," Harlan said. "Think about it. I will come back tomorrow for your signature." He left her sitting in the gloom. Ingrid felt the walls closing in. She could not go back east to her family without money. She could not stay here and be hunted. The bell above the door chimed. Cole Mercer walked in. He looked tired. He held a sack of flour over his shoulder. He saw Ingrid sitting in the dark and paused. He set the flour down on the counter and looked at her. "The sheriff is leaning on you," Cole said. It was a statement, not a question. Ingrid looked up. "Why do you care?" I don't, Cole said, but I know Harlan. And I know Silas Brand. If they want the land, they will take it. They want me to sign something, Ingrid said. Cole nodded. To make it legal. So when they graze their cattle over Rourke's fences, no judge can stop them. I have nowhere to go, Ingrid said. Her voice broke. Just a fracture? Cole looked at her for a long time. He seemed to be weighing something heavy. He looked at her hands, clenched in her lap. He looked at the way she tried to make herself small in the chair. I have a line camp, Cole said. Ingrid blinked. What? I work for the Double Bar Ranch, but I stay at the Winter Line Camp. It is 20 miles north. High country, isolated. Ingrid stiffened. I am not that kind of woman, Mr. Mercer. Cole held up a hand. I am not asking you to be. I need a cook. And I need someone to watch the camp when I'm riding lines. It is hard work. It is lonely. But Harlan and Brand won't bother you up there. Not until the snow melts in the spring. Ingrid searched his face. She looked for the lecherous gleam she had seen in so many other men. She saw only fatigue and a strange, stony patience. What is the bargain? She asked. You cook. You keep the fire. I pay you standard wages. You keep your own money. Come spring, you will have enough to buy your own ticket to wherever you want to go. And living arrangements? Ingrid asked, her face heating. It is a one-room cabin, Cole said bluntly. But I sleep in the loft. You take the bunk. Ingrid looked at him. Being alone in the wilderness with a strange man was madness. It was everything her mother had warned her against. But staying here, with the sheriff and the laughter and the eyes, that was a different kind of death. If I say no, she asked, then Harlan puts you on a train with nothing, or Brand's men burn you out of whatever hole you find. Cole said. Ingrid took a breath. It rattled in her chest. I have conditions, she said. Name them. A separate bed, as you said. I keep my own wages, and you do not touch me, not ever, unless I say yes. Cole looked her in the eye. He did not smile. He did not mock her. I have no interest in touching what is not offered, Miss Halverson. I am looking for peace. Same as you. Ingrid stood up. She towered over him by 2 inches. She held out her hand. When do we leave? Dawn, Cole said. He did not shake her hand. He just nodded. The ride north was a descent into purgatory. Cole had secured a horse for her, a sturdy roan mare. But Ingrid had not ridden since she was a girl in the old country. The saddle was hard. Unforgiving leather. Within 2 hours, her inner thighs were raw. Within 4, her back felt like it had been beaten with a hammer. The wind did not cease. It screamed across the open plains, biting through her thin coat. The landscape was terrifyingly empty. There were no trees, no houses, nothing but the endless rolling brown ocean of grass and the gray sky. It felt like judgment. It felt like the earth itself was rejecting her. Cole rode ahead, his body moving in rhythm with his horse. He did not speak. He did not look back often. He simply rode, a dark shape against the wind. Ingrid bit her lip until it tasted of copper. She would not complain. She had spent her life being looked at as a freak, a burden, a clumsy giant. She would not give this silent cowboy the satisfaction of hearing her whine. They climbed higher. The air grew thinner and colder. By the time they reached the line camp, the sun was a bruised purple smear on the western horizon. The camp was stark, a rough-hewn log cabin, a small corral, and a lean-to for wood. It sat in the lee of a rocky ridge, sheltered slightly from the worst of the gales. Cole dismounted and helped her down. When her boots hit the ground, her legs buckled. Cole caught her elbow, just for a second, to steady her, then released her immediately. Inside. He lit a kerosene lamp. The cabin was sparse. A wood stove, a table, 2 chairs, a bunk against the wall, and a ladder leading to a small loft. It smelled of pine pitch and old coffee. Cole pointed to the water barrel. Rule 1, he said. We never let the water get low. The creek is 100 yards down the slope. It freezes at night. You have to break the ice. Ingrid nodded, shivering. Rule 2. Cole continued. Firewood. We keep the box full. If a blizzard hits, we cannot go out. He walked to the window and pointed to the darkness. Rule 3, wolves. They are hungry this year. If you go to the privy at night, you take a lantern and a gun. I will teach you how to shoot. And if riders come? Ingrid asked. Cole turned to her. The lamplight cast deep shadows across his face. If riders come, you get inside and bar the door. You do not open it for anyone but me. He looked at her, seeing the exhaustion in her posture. There are beans in the pot, he said softer. Eat, then sleep. I will take the first watch. The first week was a blur of pain and labor. Ingrid's body, unused to the rigors of the frontier, ached constantly, but she found a rhythm. She learned to bank the fire so it lasted until morning. She learned to mix sourdough biscuits. She learned that silence could be shared without being awkward. One night, the nightmare came. It was the old dream. She was back in the tent. The crowd was pressing in. Hundreds of hands reaching out to pinch her, to pull her hair. The ringmaster was laughing, counting coins. Look at the monster. Look at the giant. Ingrid woke up screaming. She was standing in the middle of the cabin floor. In her hand, she gripped the heavy cast-iron skillet, raised high to strike. Her chest was heaving, her eyes wide and unseeing in the dark. Ingrid! The voice cut through the panic. She blinked. The red fog of the nightmare receded. She saw Cole. He was standing by the ladder, wearing only his long johns and trousers. He was barefoot. He had his hands up, palms open, showing he was unarmed. He was 10 feet away, backed against the wall. Ingrid, Cole said softly. You are safe. You are at the camp. Ingrid lowered the skillet. She looked around, confused. She looked at Cole, half naked and vulnerable, yet radiating a calm that anchored her. I thought, she stammered. She dropped the pan. It clattered loudly on the wood floor. Shame washed over her. Hot and terrible. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I am crazy. You must think I am a lunatic. Cole did not move closer. He stayed against the wall. I think you have had to fight for your space, Cole said. Ingrid sank onto a chair, burying her face in her hands. They used to pay to see me, she whispered. The words leaked out, a poison she had carried for years. My father, when we first came to America, we had no money. A man offered, a circus man. He put me in a dress that was too small. He told people I was a savage from the Icelands. Men would touch me to see if I was real. She sobbed, a harsh, jagged sound. I was just a girl. She said, but I was so big. They did not think I had feelings. They thought I was just meat. The silence in the cabin was heavy. The wind howled outside, scratching at the logs. Cole's voice came from the shadows. It was not filled with pity. It was filled with a hard, dark understanding. I cannot change what they did, Cole said. He stepped forward, just into the circle of light from the dying coals of the stove. But here, Cole said, looking her in the eyes, you get to be private. No one looks at you here unless you want them to. No one touches. You are just Ingrid. Ingrid looked up. He was not looking at her body. He was looking at her grief. Go back to sleep, Ingrid, he said gently. I will sit up for a while. November brought the snow. It started as a dusting, then turned into a white curtain that walled them off from the world. The drifts piled up against the cabin door. The line camp became a tiny island in a sea of white. Ingrid realized with a sudden jolt that she was trapped. She had traded the cage of the town for the cage of this cabin, but as the days went by, she realized the difference. This cage had peace. She and Cole moved around each other in a choreographed dance of domesticity. He mended tack by the fire while she kneaded dough. They spoke little, but the words were necessary. Pass the water. The wind is shifting. The coffee is ready. She watched him. She noticed the way his hands were scarred but gentle when he cleaned his rifle. She noticed that he never let his eyes linger on her inappropriately. He kept his promise. He was a monk of the high plains. Gratitude began to swell in her chest. Replacing the fear, he was saving her. He was feeding her. He was protecting her from the Brands and Harlans of the world. One evening, the storm was particularly fierce. The cabin shuddered under the assault of the wind. The lantern cast a warm, golden glow over the table. Ingrid had mended a tear in Cole's coat. She bit the thread and handed it back to him. "Thank you," Cole said. Ingrid looked at him. His face was relaxed, the tension around his eyes smoothed out by the firelight. He looked younger. "Cole," she said. He looked up. "Yeah, thank you," she said, "for taking me in, for being decent." Cole shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It is a trade. Ingrid, you cook better biscuits than I ever did." "It is more than that," she said. She stood up. The gratitude felt like a pressure inside her. She felt she owed him something. That was how the world worked, wasn't it? A woman paid for protection with her body. That was what the sheriff had implied. That was what the circus had taught her. She wanted to show him she was grateful. She wanted to prove she wasn't just a burden. She walked around the table. Cole went still. Ingrid leaned down. She aimed for his cheek, a sisterly peck, a polite goodbye to the day, but she misjudged. Or he turned. Her lips brushed the corner of his mouth. It was electric. The contact was shocking, warm and rough. Ingrid froze. Her breath hitched. Suddenly, the memory of every grab, every unwanted touch, every jeer crashed into her. The intimacy was too much, too fast. It wasn't the transaction she had prepared herself for. It was real, and that was terrifying. She pulled back, gasping. Her hand flew to her mouth. "First kiss hurts," she whispered. The words tumbled out, nonsensical, born of a child's logic and a woman's panic. Cole was on his feet instantly. He backed away, putting the table between them. His face was pale. "Ingrid," he said, his voice rough. "I am sorry. I moved too close." "No," Ingrid said, tears springing to her eyes. She was shaking again. "I should have been more careful," Cole said. He held up his hands, the same way he had during the nightmare. "I am not asking for that. I told you, I won't take what isn't freely given." "It was," Ingrid cried. She was angry now, not at him, but at herself. She had wanted to offer warmth, but her body had reacted with fear. She was broken. She was a giant broken thing. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces together. Cole watched her. His eyes were dark with a hunger he was ruthlessly suppressing, but his voice was steady as a rock. "You are scared," he said. "That is natural. The past doesn't leave just because you want it to." He picked up his coat and hat. "I am going to check the horses," he said. "But the storm—" Ingrid started. "I need the cold," Cole said. He opened the door. The wind shrieked, swirling snow into the room. He stepped out and shut the door firmly behind him. Ingrid stood alone in the center of the room. She touched her lips. They tingled. She sank to the floor, the firelight dancing on the walls, and wept. She cried because he was a good man. And she cried because she was afraid that she was too damaged to ever let him know it. Outside, in the howling white dark. Cole Mercer leaned against the logs of the cabin, closing his eyes against the cold, breathing through the desire that burned in his chest, determined to wait until she was ready, even if it took a lifetime. The storm that had locked them in finally broke, leaving the world scoured clean and buried under 3 feet of white silence. The wind did not stop. It never truly stopped in Wyoming, but it changed from a scream to a low, hollow moan that rattled the stovepipe. Life at the line camp settled into a rhythm as hard and predictable as the sun tracking across the southern sky. Survival was not a passive act. It was a series of chores that demanded muscle and will. Ingrid learned the language of the axe. At first, her swings were clumsy, the blade glancing off the frozen pine, sending shocks up her arms to her teeth. But Cole corrected her stance, tapping her boot with his own to widen her base. Within a week, she was splitting rounds with a single, cracking blow. Her size, the very thing that had made her a spectacle in the crowded cities of the East, became her currency here, when the snowdrifts piled against the barn door, blocking it shut. Cole did not have to dig it out alone. Ingrid put her shoulder against the rough wood, planted her boots in the slush, and shoved. The ice cracked. The door groaned and gave way. Cole watched her, leaning on his shovel. He did not clap. He did not make a joke about her height. He simply nodded, a gesture of respect between laborers. Good leverage, he said. It was the first time in her life a man had praised her body for what it could do, rather than what it looked like. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of wood smoke and sourdough. They rationed the beans and the salted pork. Ingrid learned to keep the starter alive, feeding the bubbling beige mixture in the crock by the warmth of the stove. They ate in silence mostly, but it was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the companionable quiet of two people who were too tired to speak. One afternoon, when the sky was the color of a bruised plum, Cole took the Winchester rifle from the rack. He motioned for Ingrid to put on her coat. "The wolves are getting bold," he said. "They smell the calves. You need to know how to answer them." They walked to the edge of the clearing. Cole set up a row of empty tin cans on a fence post 30 yards away. He handed her the rifle. It was heavy, the wood stock smooth from years of handling. "Pull it tight into your shoulder," Cole instructed, his voice flat and practical. "If you leave a gap, the kick will bruise you. Cheek to the wood. Look through the sight. Exhale. And when your lungs are empty, squeeze. Do not pull. Squeeze." Ingrid raised the weapon. Her arms, long and powerful, held the barrel steady. She felt a strange sensation, not fear, but focus. For her entire life, she had been too big, taking up too much space. But here, looking down the barrel, her size did not matter. The gun did not care how tall she was. It only cared if she was steady. She breathed out. The cold air left her lips in a white cloud. She squeezed. The rifle cracked, a sharp slap against the silence. The tin can on the far left spun into the snow. Cole looked at the can, then at her. "Center mass," he said. "Do it again." Ingrid fired again. Another can fell. She lowered the rifle, the smell of gunpowder sharp in her nose. Her shoulder throbbed where the butt plate had kicked, but the pain felt good. It felt like consequence. It felt like power. She looked at her hands, wrapped around the steel and wood. They were not shaking. The isolation was broken 10 days later by a rider on a mule. He was a circuit preacher, a man named Reverend Thomas with a face beaten red by the wind and a Bible wrapped in oilcloth. He stopped at the camp for coffee and warmth, his eyes darting around the small cabin with the hunger of a gossip. When he saw Ingrid, he paused with his tin cup halfway to his mouth. "I heard talk in town," the Reverend said, his voice dripping with a cloying pity that felt worse than an insult. "They said the big Scandinavian girl had not left the territory." "I am working," Ingrid said, turning her back to stir the beans. "It is a hard situation," the Reverend said to Cole. "A woman alone, unwed, living in close quarters. She has her own bunk." Cole said, his voice was low, warning. "And she earns her keep," the Reverend sniffed. "People talk, Mr. Mercer, and not just about morals. I spoke with Sheriff Harlan before I rode out. He and Mr. Brand are having meetings. They say the Rourke claim is in a legal tangle. They say it needs to be settled before the spring thaw brings the new herds." Ingrid felt her stomach tighten. The mention of Brand made the cabin feel smaller. "Let them talk," Cole said. "We are just wintering the line." The Reverend finished his coffee and left, leaving a sour atmosphere behind him. That night, Ingrid could not sleep. The Reverend's eyes had looked at her the way men had looked at her at the county fair in Ohio 3 years ago. She closed her eyes and saw the banner, the Nordic Giantess, a wonder of the frozen north. She felt the man's hand on her wrist, the promoter, dragging her out onto the stage. She remembered pulling back, trying to hide behind the curtain, and the roar of laughter from the crowd. "She's shy, a shy monster!" Ingrid sat up in her bunk, gasping. Cole was awake in the loft. She could hear him shifting. "Ingrid? I am fine," she said, though her voice was brittle. "Just memories." Cole climbed down the ladder. He was fully dressed. as if he expected trouble at any hour. He walked to the stove and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a tin cup. He added a splash of water and handed it to her. "Drink," he said. "It cuts the edges off." Ingrid took the cup. The whiskey burned her throat, hot and medicinal. She handed it back to him. He took a sip from the same spot her lips had touched. Cole sat in the chair opposite her. The firelight cast deep shadows in the hollows of his cheeks. "I rode with men after the war," Cole said suddenly. Ingrid looked at him. He never spoke of the past. "We called ourselves regulators," Cole said, staring into the cup. "But we were thieves. We took cattle that did not belong to us because the South was burning and we were angry." He swirled the liquid. "I quit after a job in Kansas. There was a boy guarding the herd. He could not have been more than 16. He raised a shotgun. He was shaking." Cole paused. The silence stretched tight. "I did not shoot him," Cole said softly. "But the man riding next to me did, and I did nothing to stop it. I just took the cows and rode away." He looked up at Ingrid. His eyes were bleak. "That is why I stay out here. Ingrid, the wind is loud enough to drown out the sound of that boy falling." Ingrid looked at this man, this hard, scarred creature who had offered her safety. She saw the guilt that rode him like a spur. She reached out and took the cup from his hand. She took another drink, a long one. "I once broke a man's nose," she said. Cole blinked. "What?" "A man at the fair," Ingrid said. "He tried to lift my skirt to see if my legs were like tree trunks. That is what the sign said, legs like redwoods. I hit him." She let out a short, sharp sound. It was a laugh, though it sounded rusty. "He fell into the pig pen next to the tent. He was covered in mud, and for a moment, he looked smaller than me." Cole looked at her. The corner of his mouth twitched, a smile, barely there, but real. "I bet he did," Cole said. They shared the rest of the whiskey in the dark, the wind howling outside like a chorus of ghosts. 2 people finding a strange comfort in the fact that they were both haunted. The trust grew in small, quiet ways. When Ingrid came in from the cold, her fingers stiff and blue, Cole would take her gloves. He would lay them on the warming shelf of the stove, turning them every few minutes until the leather was toasty, then hand them back without a word. When Cole tore his coat on a strand of barbed wire, Ingrid took it from him. She sat by the window and stitched the heavy wool with her precise, strong hands. As she turned the fabric, she saw stains on the lining, old, dark brown smears that refused to wash out. Blood, not his, she did not ask. She just stitched over the tear, making the seam stronger than it had been before. Then came the ice. It was mid-January. Ingrid was walking back from the creek with 2 buckets of water. The path was treacherous, a slick ribbon of frozen mud concealed by fresh snow. She stepped wrong. Her boot found a patch of black ice. Her feet went out from under her. She fell hard, the buckets clattering, the water splashing and instantly freezing on her skirt. A sharp, sickening pop echoed from her ankle. Ingrid gasped, the pain blinding her for a moment. She tried to stand, but her leg crumpled. "Cole!" she called out. He was there in seconds, running from the corral. He skidded to a stop beside her. "Do not move," he commanded. He knelt, checking her leg. His hands were gentle but firm, probing the joint through the leather of her boot. Ingrid hissed in pain. "It is sprained," Cole said. "Badly. You cannot walk on this." Ingrid looked at the distance to the cabin. It was 50 yards uphill. Panic flared. The old fear of being a burden, of being too heavy, of being unmanageable. "I can crawl," she said, trying to push herself up. "Don't be a fool," Cole said. He stood up. He bent down and scooped her up into his arms. Ingrid froze. She weighed over 200 pounds. Most men would struggle. Cole grunted with the effort, his jaw setting. But he lifted her. He held her high against his chest, his arms like iron bands. He did not look at her face. He looked at the ground, placing his feet carefully on the ice. He did not make it a romance. He did not try to hold her closer than necessary. It was a fireman's carry, a matter of physics and necessity. Ingrid held onto his shoulders. She could feel the heat radiating from him. She could smell the tobacco and wool of his coat. For the first time in her life, she was being carried, and the man doing it was not complaining. He was not making a joke of it. He kicked the cabin door open and carried her to the bunk, setting her down gently. He stepped back, breathing hard, rubbing his bicep. "I will get the snow to pack it," he said. Ingrid sat on the edge of the mattress, clutching her throbbing ankle. She realized something that made her heart hammer faster than the pain. She had not panicked. When he had touched her, when he had lifted her, she had not felt the urge to strike him or flee. She had felt safe. 2 weeks later, the illusion of safety was shattered. Sheriff Harlan rode into the clearing, flanked by 2 deputies. They did not look like men on a social call. They wore heavy coats and carried scatterguns across their saddles. Cole met them at the porch. He did not invite them down. "Sheriff," Cole said, leaning against the doorframe, "you are a long way from town." "Checking the lines," Harlan said. He looked past Cole, through the open door, to where Ingrid sat at the table peeling potatoes. Her ankle was still wrapped, propped up on a stool. "And checking on the lady," Harlan added. "I am fine," Ingrid called out. Her voice was steady, though her hands went still. Harlan dismounted. He walked up the steps, his spurs jingling. He stopped 2 feet from Cole. "There is talk. Mercer, about a woman living up here without papers, without a husband. Some folks think it is improper. Some folks think it might be misunderstood." "Misunderstood how?" Cole asked. "As harboring a vagrant," Harlan said, "or taking advantage of a widow's grief." "Ingrid is not a widow," Cole said, "and she is my employee." Harlan smiled, that shark-like, dead-eyed smile. "Silas Brand is a traditional man," Harlan said. "He thinks a woman like Miss Halverson needs a proper situation, a marriage to a local man, or perhaps a train ticket out of the county. He is expanding. Cole, he wants the Rourke water rights, and he does not like loose ends." He looked at Ingrid again. It was the look a butcher gives a side of beef. "You look healthy, Miss Halverson. Country air suits you. Shame if you had to leave it." "We are not selling," Cole said. Harlan turned back to Cole. His voice dropped to a whisper that Ingrid could still hear. "You are a line rider. Mercer, you are nobody. Do not mistake a winter shack for a fortress. Brand will have that land, and if you stand in the way, he will go through you." The sheriff tipped his hat to Ingrid, mocking, cruel, and remounted. "Think on it," he called out. "Spring comes fast." They rode away, leaving the silence of the camp fractured and bleeding. Ingrid stood up, ignoring the twinge in her ankle. She was shaking, not from cold, but from a white-hot fury mixed with the terror of a trapped animal. "They will come back," she said. Cole closed the door and barred it. He turned to her. "Yes, they will. They want me to sign," she said, "or they want me gone." Cole walked to the window, watching the riders disappear into the trees. "We have to go to the county seat," he said. "What? In the spring?" Cole said, turning to face her. "We go to the courthouse. We file for your rights as Rourke's intended. We claim the land is yours by contract of betrothal." "I am not a widow," Ingrid cried. "I told you, we never married. The law does not care about your heart." "Ingrid," Cole said sharply, "it cares about paper. If we can prove intent, if we can prove you came here in good faith to be his wife, a judge might grant you the claim, or at least put a hold on Brand taking it." "And then what?" Ingrid asked. "Then I am just a woman with a piece of paper and a cattle baron trying to kill me." "Then we create a shield," Cole said. He took a breath. He looked at her, his eyes searching her face. "We tell them you are under my protection." "Your protection? We tell them you are my intended—" The room went silent. The fire popped in the stove. Ingrid stared at him. "You mean we lie? We tell them that since Rourke passed, you and I have formed an attachment, that we intend to wed." Ingrid felt the walls closing in again. Marriage. Belonging. It was the trap she had run halfway across the country to escape. "I will not belong to any man," she whispered. "I will not be property. It is for show," Cole said quickly, "to make them hesitate. Brand might kill a squatter, but he will think twice about killing a man's betrothed in open conflict. It buys us time." Ingrid paced the small room, her limp pronounced. "And if I agree?" she asked. "What does this betrothal mean? Inside this house, it means nothing changes," Cole said. "Unless you want it to." Ingrid stopped. She looked at him. She saw the man who had warmed her gloves, the man who had carried her over the ice without groping her, the man who had taught her to shoot. She took a deep breath. "I have conditions," she said. Cole nodded. "Always. I choose the steps." She said, "If we do this, if we pretend, I say where it goes. And if I say stop, you stop, even if the world is watching, even if it ruins the story." Cole did not hesitate. "If you say stop, the world can burn for all I care. I stop." The pact hung between them for days, a tension that was both terrifying and thrilling. They were conspirators now. One evening, the wind died down, leaving a silence so profound it rang in the ears. They were sitting on the bench by the stove. Usually, they sat on opposite sides of the room. Tonight, Ingrid did not move to her bunk. She sat next to him. She shifted her weight until her shoulder brushed against his arm. Cole went still. He did not pull away, but he did not lean in. He let her initiate. The contact was small, 2 layers of wool touching, but it felt like lightning held in a jar. Ingrid stared at the fire. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was 24 years old, and she was afraid of a touch. She hated the fear. She hated the men who had planted it there. "Cole," she said softly. "Yeah, I want to try again." Cole turned his head slowly. "Try what? The kiss?" she said. He looked at her. His eyes were dark, dilated in the dim light. "Ingrid, you don't have to—" "I do," she interrupted. "Not for you. For me." She turned to face him. Her eyes were wet, but her chin was high. "I am tired of being afraid of my own body. Cole, I am tired of flinching. I want to know. I need to know if I can do it. Without hurting." Cole looked at her mouth, then up to her eyes. He placed his hand on the bench between them, palm up. An invitation, not a command. "Tell me when," he said. Ingrid leaned forward. She could smell soap and wood smoke on him. She could see the fine lines around his eyes. She was terrified, but she was also furious. Furious at the past for stealing this softness from her. "Now," she whispered. Cole leaned in. He moved slowly, giving her 1,000 chances to pull back. He did not grab her. He did not put his hands on her waist. He simply leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. It was not like the first time. It was not a collision. It was a question. His lips were chapped but warm. He held the kiss for 3 seconds, light and steady. Ingrid trembled. A shudder ran through her massive frame. Tears leaked from her eyes, hot and fast. Cole pulled back immediately. "Ingrid, I am okay," she gasped. "I am okay." She wasn't crying from pain. She was crying from relief. It hadn't hurt. He hadn't tried to own her. He hadn't tried to devour her. She reached out and grabbed the lapels of his coat. She pulled him back. Again, she whispered, "Please." This time, she kissed him. She pressed her mouth against his, awkward and hungry. She felt the stubble on his chin. She felt the sudden, sharp intake of his breath. Cole's hands came up, hovering for a split second before settling on her waist. His touch was heavy, grounding. He held her as if she were something precious, something that might break, even though she was strong enough to lift a wagon wheel. They broke apart, breathing hard. Ingrid rested her forehead against his chest. She sobbed, just once, a deep, shuddering release. Cole wrapped his arms around her, enveloping her. He did not try to move her to the bunk. He did not try to unbutton her dress. He just held her, rocking her slightly as the tears came. "You are safe," he murmured into her hair. "You are here. You are private." Ingrid clung to him. She realized, with a clarity that stung, that desire could exist beside fear, that she could want this man and still be herself. The howl cut through the night like a knife. It was close, too close. Cole stiffened. The tenderness vanished, replaced instantly by the soldier. The corral, he said. He grabbed the rifle. Ingrid grabbed the shotgun from the corner. They threw open the door and ran out into the snow. The night was chaos. A pack of timber wolves, desperate with winter hunger, had come over the fence. The horses were screaming, kicking at the rails. The two calves were huddled in the corner, dark shapes circling them. "Light the lantern!" Cole yelled. Raising his rifle, he fired. The flash illuminated the scene in a strobe of violence. A wolf, gray and massive, yelped and spun in the snow. Ingrid fumbled with the lucifer match, struck it, and lit the hurricane lantern. She held it high with her left hand. The shotgun braced against her hip with her right. Another wolf lunged at the calf. Ingrid didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She swung the barrel. "Hey!" she roared. Her voice was a thunderclap, deeper and louder than any man's. The wolf turned, snarling, eyes glowing yellow in the lantern light. Ingrid pulled the trigger. The shotgun roared, kicking hard against her hip. The buckshot tore up the snow and the animal dropped. Cole was firing steadily, the lever of his Winchester clacking. Chick, chick, boom! Chick, chick, boom! "Get back!" Cole shouted, advancing on the remaining wolves. Together, they formed a wall of noise and fire. They were not a man protecting a woman. They were a pack of two defending their territory. The surviving wolves, realizing the cost was too high, turned and scrambled over the fence, vanishing into the black timber. Silence rushed back in, ringing in their ears. The air smelled of sulfur and blood. Ingrid lowered the shotgun. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm, but her hands were steady. She looked at Cole. He was breathing hard, smoke drifting from his rifle barrel. "Check the stock," he said. They found one calf down, throat torn. It was dead. The other was shivering, bleeding from a flank bite, but alive. The horses were unhurt. They worked in silence for the next hour. They dragged the dead wolf carcasses to the edge of the ravine. They treated the wounded calf with pine tar. By the time they finished, the eastern sky was turning a bruised gray. Dawn. They stood by the corral fence, exhausted, their breath pluming in the freezing air. Ingrid looked at the dead calf, half buried in the snow. "I am tired." "Cole," she whispered. He looked at her. He wiped a smear of soot from his forehead. "Tired of the work?" "No," she said. She looked at the horizon, where the town lay miles away, where Harlan and Brand were waiting. "I am tired of being hunted, by men, by wolves, by memories. I am tired of running away." Cole ejected the last spent shell from his rifle. It pinged off the frozen ground. He looked at Ingrid, tall, formidable, standing in the bloodied snow with a shotgun in her hand. "Then we stop running," he said. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was hard, calloused, and real. "Come spring, we go to town, and we take the fight to them." Spring broke over the Wyoming territory, not with a gentle awakening, but with a violent, heaving thaw. The snow, which had been a clean white blanket for months, collapsed into a thick, sucking gumbo of mud that threatened to swallow wagon wheels whole. The creeks swelled into brown torrents, tearing at their banks, and the air smelled of wet earth and rotting grass. For Ingrid Halverson and Cole Mercer, the ride back to town was a battle against the landscape. The wagon lurched and groaned, the horses fighting for every step in the mire. Mud splattered Ingrid's skirts, drying in heavy gray cakes. But the filth of the road was the least of her worries. She gripped the bench seat, her knuckles white. She had spent the winter in the sanctuary of the line camp, where the only eyes watching her belonged to a man who looked without judging. Now, she was returning to the gallery. "Do not look at them," Cole said. He kept his eyes on the horses, his hands steady on the reins. "They are just people, Ingrid, small people with small minds." "They are a pack," Ingrid replied, "and I am the strange bird they want to peck to death." When they rolled onto the main street, the town seemed to pause. The blacksmith stopped his hammer. The women on the boardwalk ceased their chatter. Heads turned, fingers pointed. The gossip had fermented over the winter, growing teeth. It was no longer just curiosity about her height. It was speculation about her life in the snow. Ingrid could hear the whispers drifting on the damp air like smoke. That is her, the giant bride, wintered up there with him. You know what that means. Imagine the size of the bed. Ingrid's face burned. The heat started at her neck and flooded her cheeks. She fixed her gaze on the ears of the lead horse, refusing to shrink. She was 6 feet and 4 inches of target, but she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Cole drove the wagon to the livery stable. He helped her down, his hand firm under her elbow. He did not linger, but he did not pull away when a group of miners on the porch snickered. He simply stood between her and them, a silent barrier of weathered canvas and cold iron. "We have business," Cole said. "Stay close." Their first stop was the general store for supplies. As they loaded sacks of flour and coffee, a man approached. He was dressed too well for a working hand, wearing a clean bowler hat and a vest with silver buttons. This was Kellis, the foreman for the Brand Ranch. "Miss Halvorsen," Kellis said, tipping his hat with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Mr. Brand sends his regards. He hopes you survive the winter without undue hardship." "We are fine," Ingrid said. Her voice was tight. "Mr. Brand is a generous man." Kellis continued. "He is prepared to offer you $300 for the quitclaim deed on the Rourke place. It is a lot of money for a woman in your position. Enough to go somewhere. More accommodating to your stature." "I am not selling," Ingrid said. Kellis's smile vanished. He stepped closer, invading her space. He was a foot shorter than her, but he carried the weight of his employer's power. "Stubbornness is a dangerous quality out here. Darling, accidents happen. Claims get jumped. It would be a shame if you got hurt trying to hold on to dirt you cannot defend." Cole stepped in. He did not shove Kellis. He simply occupied the space where Kellis was standing, forcing the smaller man to retreat or be trampled. "She gave you her answer." Cole said, "Tell Brand the price is not for sale." Kellis dusted off his vest. "Have it your way. Mercer, but do not say you were not warned." Kellis walked away, leaving a chill in the air that the spring sun could not touch. An hour later, Sheriff Wade Harlan found them near the post office. He held a piece of paper, waving it like a fan. "Good to see you, Miss Halvorsen," Harlan said. "I have news. The county judge has scheduled a hearing regarding the disposition of the Rourke claim." "When?" Cole asked. "Friday," Harlan said. 2 days from now." 2 days. Cole's voice rose. "That is not enough time to prepare a case. It is the circuit schedule." Harlan shrugged. "The judge is a busy man. If you are not there with proof of ownership, the land reverts to the territory, and the territory will likely sell to the highest bidder, which is Brand," Ingrid said. Harlan smiled. "That is how the market works. Miss Halvorsen." "Efficiency." Ingrid realized then that the law was not a shield. It was a rope, and Harlan was tightening the noose. They needed help. Cole tried to find a lawyer, but the few attorneys in town suddenly had full calendars or shook their heads the moment Brand's name was mentioned. Only one man, a disheveled solicitor named Mr. Abernathy, agreed to listen. "I can represent you," Abernathy said, shuffling papers in his dusty office. "But it will be a fight. Brand owns half the county. I will need a retainer. $100. Up front." Cole went silent. He had $30 in his pocket from the winter wages. "We don't have it," Cole said. "I do," Ingrid said. She reached into her bodice and pulled out a small, heavy cloth pouch. She undid the strings and spilled the coins onto the desk. Gold pieces, silver dollars. It was a substantial sum. "Ingrid," Cole said, staring at the money, "where did you get this?" Ingrid looked at the coins. They shone under the lamplight. "I earned it," she said. She looked at Cole, her eyes defiant and sad. "I earned it in Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and New York. Every time I stood on a stage and let them look at me, every time I let a man measure my wrists, every time I answered their foolish questions, I saved every penny. I thought it was money for my family. But my family is gone." She pushed the pile toward the lawyer. "This is my shame money," she said. "I can think of no better way to spend it than to buy my dignity back." Cole put his hand over hers to stop her. Just for a moment. "You do not have to do this," he said. "That is your freedom money." Ingrid looked at him. "I am choosing my freedom." Cole. Cole slowly pulled his hand back. He looked at her with a profound respect, realizing that her strength was not just in her shoulders, but in her willingness to burn her past to build a future. "Make it enough," Cole told the lawyer, "to strengthen their claim." They had to sell the lie. The town needed to believe that Ingrid was not just a squatter, but a woman betrothed. They walked to the mercantile together. Cole placed his hand on the small of her back. He did not grip her. His touch was light, a mere point of contact. But to the onlookers, it was a claim. The reaction was immediate. A woman dropped a bolt of fabric. Men stopped talking. The idea of the reclusive, dangerous cowboy and the giantess forming a union sparked a wildfire of ridicule and offense. It came to a head on Sunday. The town was holding a church picnic in the grove of cottonwoods by the river. Marion Locke, a widow who worked as the town's midwife, had found Ingrid earlier that morning. Marion was a sharp-boned woman with eyes that missed nothing. She had been the one to pull Ingrid into her parlor when the stairs got too heavy, offering tea and silence. "You have to go," Marion advised. "If you hide, they decide who you are. If you stand there, you make them look you in the eye." So they went. The grove was filled with families eating fried chicken on quilts. When Ingrid and Cole arrived, a silence rippled through the crowd like a wind across wheat. They filled plates and sat near the edge of the gathering. Marion joined them, sitting on Ingrid's left like a guard dog. A woman approached. It was Mrs. Calloway, the wife of a prosperous rancher who did business with Brand. She wore a silk dress that rustled with self-importance. "Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Calloway said, ignoring Ingrid. "We were surprised to see you here, and with company." "Ingrid is my intended," Cole said calmly. "Is she?" Mrs. Calloway sniffed. She looked at Ingrid with open disgust. "It seems unnatural. A woman of such proportions. It is like a jest against God's design. One wonders what kind of man is drawn to such a thing. It must be a sin to tempt men into such perversions." The air went still. Ingrid felt the old urge to flee. She felt the tears pricking her eyes, the shame of the carnival tent rising in her throat. She started to stand, to run back to the wagon. Cole stood up. He did not shout. He did not draw a weapon. He simply looked at Mrs. Calloway with a gaze so cold it could have frozen the river. "Say that again," Cole said. "Excuse me?" Mrs. Calloway stammered. "Say it louder," Cole said. "So everyone can hear you insult a woman who has done you no harm. Explain to the Reverend exactly how my future wife is a sin." Mrs. Calloway took a step back, flustered. Ingrid reached up and touched Cole's arm. "No, Cole," she said. She stood up. She unfolded to her full height. She looked down at Mrs. Calloway, and for the first time, she did not slouch. She did not try to make herself smaller. "I am not a spectacle," Ingrid said. Her voice shook, but it carried clearly across the quiet grove. "And I am not a punishment. I work hard. I pay my debts. I bleed when I am cut, just like you." She looked around the crowd, meeting the eyes of the people who had whispered, "I am not a thing to be traded or laughed at. I am a woman, and if God made me this size, it is because he knew I would need to carry heavy burdens like your cruelty." She sat down. For a moment, no one moved. Then, Marion Locke took a loud, deliberate bite of a pickle. "Well said," Marion declared. A few of the homesteaders nodded. Some of the men looked at their boots, ashamed. Mrs. Calloway turned red and huffed away, but the venom had been drawn out of the wound. The victory was short-lived. That afternoon, a rider brought a note. Silas Brand invited Miss Halverson to his ranch to discuss a final settlement before the hearing. Cole refused to let her go alone. They rode out to the Brand estate, a sprawling compound that looked more like a feudal kingdom than a ranch. The main house was 2 stories of white-painted wood with glass windows imported from St. Louis. But as they passed the bunkhouses, Ingrid saw the reality. The hired hands lived in squalor. Mud-caked shacks with no windows. The corrals were overcrowded. It was wealth built on misery. Brand met them in his study. He was a man of 60, with a white beard and eyes like flint. He sat behind a mahogany desk, smoking a cigar. "Miss Halverson," Brand said, "you are even more impressive close up." He did not offer them a seat. "I have a proposition," Brand said. "This hearing is going to be messy. Lawyers are expensive. The outcome is uncertain. I can make it simple." "How?" Ingrid asked. "Marry me," Brand said. Ingrid blinked. The suggestion was so absurd she almost laughed. "I need a wife," Brand said, as if ordering a plow. "A strong one. My last wife was frail. She died in childbirth. You are built for survival. You could give me strong sons." He stood up and walked around the desk. "Marry me, and you will have security. You will have this house. You will never be hungry. You will be respectable. No one will dare laugh at Mrs. Silas Brand." "And the land?" Ingrid asked. "The land becomes mine, of course," Brand said. Ingrid looked at him. She saw the transactional nature of his soul. He did not want a wife. He wanted a broodmare and a water source. "And if I refuse," Brand stopped. He looked at Cole, who was standing by the door, his hand resting near his gun. "If you refuse," Brand said softly, "you will lose the court case. You will be destitute. And Mr. Mercer, well, this is a dangerous country. Men disappear in the high passes all the time. Wolves, rock slides, accidents." Ingrid felt a wave of nausea. It was the same old story. Men offering safety with one hand and a cage with the other. "We are leaving," Ingrid said. She turned and walked out. Cole backed out of the room, his eyes never leaving Brand. The ride back to the cabin was tense. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the plains. Ingrid felt a storm raging inside her. The threat against Cole terrified her. The offer of safety sickened her. But beneath the fear, something else was rising. Adrenaline, defiance, and a desperate need to feel something other than dread. They reached the creek crossing as the last light faded. Ingrid pulled her horse to a stop. "Ingrid?" Cole asked. She slid from the saddle. She walked over to him and grabbed his leg. Looking up, "Get down," she commanded. Cole swung down from his horse, before his boots hit the mud. She was on him. She kissed him. It was not the gentle, testing kiss of the winter. It was fierce. It was a collision of teeth and lips. She grabbed his coat, pulling him against her. She wanted to erase Brand's voice. She wanted to erase the staring crowds. She wanted to prove she was alive. Cole responded instantly. His arms went around her, crushing her to him. He kissed her back with a hunger that had been starved for months. Then, just as quickly, Ingrid pulled away. She gasped, stumbling back. Her hands flew to her chest. "No," she whispered. "No, She was terrified. Her body was screaming for him, clamoring for the heat, but her mind slammed the gate shut. The fear of being consumed, of being used, of losing herself. It roared back. Cole stood panting, his eyes black in the twilight. He did not chase her. "I am sorry," Ingrid said. "I am broken. I want, but I can't." Cole took a step forward, but he stopped when she flinched. "You are not broken." "Ingrid," he said. His voice was rough, but steady. "You are just healing, and healing hurts." He walked over to her slowly. He did not touch her. He just stood close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I want you," he said, painfully. "I have wanted you since the first day I saw you standing against that wall. But I will not let your fear decide for you, and I will not let your need be my permission if you aren't ready. But I am afraid," she whispered. "Wanting doesn't erase the fear," Cole said. "And fear doesn't mean you are broken. It just means you are human. We can wait." They rode the rest of the way in silence. But it was a shared silence, thick with unsaid things. Back at the cabin, the fire was dead. Cole lit it. the flames casting dancing shadows on the logs. Ingrid took off her coat. She stood by the bunk, watching him. She thought about Brand's cold offer. She thought about the circus tent. She thought about the way Cole had defended her name in the church grove. She made a choice. "Cole," she said. He turned. "I do not want to wait." She said, "But I need it to be slow. I need to be the one who says when." Cole nodded. He walked over to her. He did not rush. He stood before her. "Tell me," he said. "Touch my face," she whispered. Cole raised his hand. He cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed her jaw. "Kiss me," she said, gently. He did. "Open my dress," she said. His fingers worked the buttons. He was shaking slightly. She realized. He was afraid too. Afraid of hurting her. Afraid of doing it wrong. That realization broke the last chain around her heart. They moved to the narrow bunk. It creaked under their combined weight. The night became a series of whispered permissions. "Is this okay? Yes. Here. Yes. Stop." He stopped instantly. He held her, waiting, his breath hot against her neck. "Okay, go." It was not a conquest. It was a conversation. For the first time in her life, Ingrid was not a landscape to be conquered or an oddity to be examined. She was a participant. She asked him to promise. "Cole," she whispered in the dark, her skin against his. "If I ever say no, even if I whisper it, promise me you will listen." Cole kissed her forehead. It felt like a seal on a document. "Always," he said. "I swear it." The fear was there, lurking at the edges, but she pushed it back with every breath. She chose to be held. She chose to be touched. She chose to trust him. When the release came, it was not an explosion, but a profound, shuddering wave of relief. She cried out, not in shame, but in victory. She had reclaimed the territory of her own skin. Cole held her afterward, his arm thrown over her waist, their legs tangled. She listened to his heart slow down. She felt powerful. She felt real. The morning brought the world back with a vengeance. Cole went out at dawn to feed the horses. He came back inside 2 minutes later, his face grim. "Come look," he said. Ingrid wrapped a blanket around herself and went to the door. In the mud around the cabin, there were prints, hoof prints. Men had circled the cabin in the night. They had come close enough to look in the windows if the shutters hadn't been drawn. They hadn't attacked. They had just left a message. "We are here. We can take you whenever we want." "Brand," Ingrid said. "He is tightening the screws." Cole said. He went to the supply chest and began pulling out traps. Heavy steel jaw traps he used for bears. "We can't stay here tonight," Cole said. "I will set these around the perimeter, but it isn't safe. I am taking you to Marion's in town. You will be safe there until the hearing." "No," Ingrid said. Cole looked up. "Ingrid, this isn't a game." They were 10 feet from where we slept. "I am not hiding," she said. She walked over to the wash basin and splashed cold water on her face. "If I go to Marion's, I'm just hiding behind another skirt. If we leave this claim, Brand wins. We stay. We face the hearing tomorrow." Cole looked at her. He saw the set of her jaw. He saw the woman who had shot a wolf. "All right," he said, "but we sleep in shifts. And the guns stay loaded." At noon, a boy on a pony rode up. It was the messenger from the telegraph office, looking terrified to be this far out. "Telegram for Miss Halverson?" The boy squeaked, tossing the envelope and turning his pony around before she could even answer. Ingrid tore it open. Her hands shook. "What is it?" Cole asked. She looked at him, her face pale. "It is from the court clerk," she said. "The judge arrived early. The hearing has been moved." "To when?" "This afternoon." She said, "At 4 o'clock." Cole looked at the sun. It was already past 1. "It is a trap," Cole said. "They knew we were out here. They knew we couldn't make it in time if they changed the schedule last minute." Ingrid threw the paper into the fire. "Hitch the wagon," she said. "We can't make it in the wagon," Cole said. "The mud is too deep." "Then we ride," Ingrid said. "And we ride hard." She grabbed her coat. "I am not losing this. Cole, not after everything." Cole grabbed his gun belt. Then let's ride. They scrambled out the door, leaving the warmth of the cabin behind, riding straight into the teeth of a game that was rigged to destroy them. The heat that spring afternoon was a physical weight, pressing down on the scorched earth between the line camp and the county seat. The road was no longer a mud pit, but had baked into a rutted washboard of hard-pan clay that rattled the teeth of anyone foolish enough to traverse it. The dust was a constant companion, coating the back of the throat and stinging the eyes. Ingrid Halvorsen sat on the seat of the rented buckboard wagon, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Cole Mercer drove, his hat pulled low against the glare, his eyes scanning the horizon where the heat shimmer made the sagebrush dance like ghosts. The land looked endless and indifferent, a vast, tawny ocean of dry grass that did not care if they lived or died, or who owned the deed to a patch of dirt near a creek. It would remain long after their names were eroded from headstones. "We will be there in an hour," Cole said, his voice raspy from the dust. Ingrid nodded but did not speak. The dread in her stomach was heavier than the heat. She had faced wolves and blizzards, but those were honest enemies. A courtroom was a different kind of predator, one that used words she did not fully understand and laws written by men who had never seen a woman like her. When they rolled into the county seat, the town was already simmering. Horses stood 3 deep at the hitching rails, their tails swatting lazily at flies. The courthouse, a 2-story brick structure that looked out of place against the raw timber of the rest of the town, loomed at the end of the main street. They walked up the steps together. Cole offered his arm, but Ingrid hesitated before taking it. She felt the eyes of the idlers on the lawn, men whittling sticks and chewing tobacco, slide over her frame. "Look at the size of her. That is the giantess. Who is the man?" Inside, the courtroom was stifling. The windows were open, but the air refused to move. The room was packed. Silas Brand sat at the plaintiff's table, looking cool and composed in a charcoal suit. Beside him was his lawyer, a man named Ephraim Galt, who had the sharp, hungry features of a weasel. Sheriff Wade Harlan sat behind them, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that promised nothing good. Ingrid and Cole took their seats at the defendant's table. They had no lawyer, the retainer had been too high, and the one honest man, Mr. Abernathy, had taken ill suddenly, a convenience that smelled of Brand's money. Judge Thaddeus Stone banged his gavel. He was a man with a face like a dried apple and little patience for the frontier rabble. "This court is now in session," the judge intoned. "We are here to determine the disposition of the claim filed by the late Elias Rourke and the subsequent petition by Silas Brand for acquisition of said lands. Mr. Galt stood up. He hooked his thumbs into his vest pockets and paced in front of the bench. "Your Honor," Galt began, his voice oily and smooth. "The matter is simple. Mr. Rourke died intestate. He left no heirs. My client, Mr. Brand, has offered a fair market price to the territory for the land. However, this woman clings to the property like a barnacle." He turned and pointed a long, accusatory finger at Ingrid. "She claims a right based on a marriage that never happened. She is an outsider, Your Honor, an immigrant transient who arrived after the man was already in the ground. She is a fraud, utilizing her unique physical intimidation to squat on land that belongs to decent, law-abiding citizens." Ingrid felt the blood rush to her face. The whispers in the gallery grew louder. She heard the words freak and giant ripple through the room. "Mr. Galt continued. "Furthermore, she cohabitates with a man of questionable reputation, Mr. Cole Mercer, in a manner that insults the moral fabric of this county." Cole started to stand, his chair scraping loudly against the floorboards. "Sit down, sir," the judge snapped. Cole sank back, his jaw muscle jumping. Sheriff Harlan was called to the stand. He placed his hand on the Bible with an easy familiarity that made Ingrid's stomach turn. "Sheriff," Galt asked, "in your professional opinion, is Miss Halvorsen fit to manage this claim?" Harlan looked directly at Ingrid. His eyes were flat and cold. "In my opinion, the woman is unstable." He said, "She is prone to emotional outbursts. I have seen her in states of agitation that suggest a feeble mind, living out there in the wilds, without proper male supervision. Well, it does things to a woman's head. She needs protection. Your Honor, not land. The room murmured in agreement. Of course. A woman that size, alone, she must be mad. It was easier to believe she was crazy than to believe she was capable. Ingrid stood up. Your Honor, she said. The judge peered at her over his spectacles. Do you have something to say, Miss Halverson? And be quick about it. I object, Ingrid said. The word felt clumsy in her mouth. She had heard it in stories, but here it sounded weak. I am not unstable. I work the land. On what grounds do you claim this title? The judge asked. Do you have a will, a deed, a marriage certificate? No, Ingrid said, but Elias sent for me. We had a contract, and Mr. Mercer and we are intended. The gallery erupted in laughter. Galt smiled, a thin, cruel expression. Intended, Galt mocked. A convenient fiction. Your Honor, invented to circumvent the law. Ingrid tried to explain. She tried to talk about the letters Elias had written, about the promise of a home, but the legal words tripped her. She said affidavit when she meant agreement. She stumbled over her English, the vowels of her homeland thickening her tongue under pressure. Every mistake was a victory for Galt. The judge sighed, checking his pocket watch. It seems clear. The judge said that the defendant has no legal standing. Cole was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Behind him, in the first row of the gallery, 3 of Brand's hired guns were snickering. Hey, Mercer, one whispered. Does she crush you when she rolls over? Cole spun around. Shut your mouth. Cole snarled. Order, the judge shouted. One more outburst. Mr. Mercer, and I will have you in irons. Cole turned back, his chest heaving. He was trapped. If he fought, he proved them right. If he stayed silent, they lost. Ingrid felt tears of frustration prick her eyes. She looked at the sea of faces, hostile, amused, indifferent. Then she saw Marion Locke in the back row. The midwife caught Ingrid's eye. She mimed a motion with her hands. Kneading dough, chopping wood. She mouthed one word. Work. Ingrid took a deep breath. She stopped trying to be a lawyer. She stood to her full height, ignoring the gasp from the front row. Your Honor, Ingrid said. Her voice dropped an octave, finding the resonance that came from her chest. I do not know your big words, but I know this land. She walked out from behind the table. Galt tried to step in her way, but she simply moved past him like a ship parting water. I know that the south fence has 3 posts rotted that need replacing next week. I know the creek freezes 4 inches deep in January and you must break it with an axe, not a hammer, or the handle snaps. I know the soil in the lower pasture is too alkali for wheat, but good for Timothy grass. She looked at Brand. Mr. Brand does not know this. He knows money. I know the dirt. I have paid for that claim with sweat. I have fed the stock when the wolves were scratching at the door. I have mended the roof. Is that not ownership? Is labor not the law of the West? The room went quiet. For a moment, the reality of her life, the sheer, undeniable hardness of it, cut through the legal smoke. The judge paused. He looked at Brand, then at Ingrid. He seemed unsettled by the raw dignity of her statement. This court acknowledges the value of labor, the judge said slowly. However, the legal complexities remain. I cannot issue a ruling today. I will take this matter under advisement and issue a verdict in 30 days. Until then, the status quo remains. He banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. It was not a victory. It was a stay of execution. But as Brand stood up, his face was red. He had expected to walk out with the deed. Outside, on the steps, Brand's men were celebrating as if they had won. They passed a flask of whiskey, laughing loudly. 30 days, Harlan said to Cole as they passed. A lot can happen in 30 days. Mercer, a man could have a lot of bad luck. They left town as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and bruised black. They took the buckboard wagon, needing to haul the supplies they had purchased before the hearing. The road home was a tunnel of darkness. The moon was obscured by thick clouds. The only sound was the rhythmic clatter of the wheels and the breathing of the horses. Ingrid sat beside Cole, exhausted. The adrenaline of the courtroom had faded, leaving her hollow. "You did good back there," Cole said quietly. "They didn't listen," Ingrid said. "They just looked." "They listened," Cole corrected. "You made the judge blink. That is more than most do." They reached a narrow pass where the road dipped through a dry wash, flanked by high banks of scrub oak and rock. It was a natural choke point. Cole stiffened. He pulled back on the reins. "Whoa," he whispered. The air felt wrong, too quiet. The crickets had stopped singing. Crack. A rifle shot shattered the night. The bullet struck the front left wheel of the wagon. The spokes shattered. The wagon lurched violently to the left. Tipping, Ingrid was thrown sideways. She hit the dirt hard, the breath driven from her lungs. The horses screamed, rearing in their traces, tangled in the leather. "Cole!" she gasped. Cole had been thrown clear, but he was not moving. He lay near the broken wheel, a dark shape in the dust. Another shot rang out, kicking up dirt inches from Ingrid's head. She scrambled on her hands and knees, crawling toward the cover of the overturned wagon bed. Her hand brushed against something cold in the dirt. The shotgun Cole had placed under the seat. It had fallen out in the crash. She grabbed it. Two figures were moving on the ridge above them, silhouetted against the faint starlight. "Finish it!" a voice yelled. It was the voice of one of the men from the courtroom. Ingrid rolled onto her back. She braced the shotgun against her shoulder. She did not tremble. The fear that usually paralyzed her was gone, replaced by a cold, mathematical clarity. She saw the muzzle flash of the next shot from the ridge. She aimed for the flash. She pulled the trigger. The shotgun roared, a massive boom that echoed off the canyon walls. The kick was brutal, but she absorbed it. A scream of pain came from the ridge. One of the shadows crumpled. The second man fired again. Wild this time, the bullet singing harmlessly into the wood of the wagon. Ingrid racked the slide. Clack, clack. The sound was unmistakable in the dark. "I see you," she roared. Her voice was terrifying, deep and primal. "Come down here and I will bury you." The second shadow hesitated, then turned and ran, scrambling back over the crest of the hill. The sound of retreating hoofbeats faded into the night. Ingrid did not lower the gun. She waited, listening, for a full minute. Only when silence returned did she crawl over to Cole. "Cole?" he groaned. He tried to sit up and winced. "My shoulder," he gritted out, "dislocated or broken." Ingrid helped him up. They were exposed on the road. "We have to move," she said, "into the ravine." She supported his weight. He was heavy, but to her, he felt manageable. She guided him down into the dry wash, away from the wagon, into the deep shadows of the cut bank. They sat in the dirt, huddled together. Ingrid kept the shotgun across her knees. "You shot him?" Cole whispered. He sounded dazed. "I aimed for the flash," Ingrid said. Her hands, resting on the stock, were finally starting to shake. Not from weakness, but from the adrenaline crash. "I could have killed him," she said. "You might have," Cole said. "You saved us." "I didn't think," Ingrid said. "I just did it." They sat in silence for a long time. The night cooled. The heat of the day radiated up from the stones. Cole shifted, his breath hissing through his teeth. "Why did you never fight back before?" Cole asked softly. "In the stories you told me, you are a force of nature." Ingrid looked at the stars. "Because I was not there," she said. She had never told anyone this. Not Marion, not even herself, really. "When I was in the shows, when they put me in those costumes and let men touch me, I left," she said. Her voice was flat. "I learned a trick. I would close my eyes and imagine I was a stone or a tree, something that could not feel. I floated above my body. I let them touch the giant girl. But Ingrid was not there. If I fought, I had to be in my body. And if I was in my body, I had to feel the shame, so I just left." She turned to Cole in the dark. "Tonight, I could not leave, because you were on the ground. And I could not let you die? So I had to stay. I had to be big. Cole reached out with his good hand and found hers in the dark. He squeezed it. I have a ghost too, he said. He leaned his head back against the dirt bank. The man I killed. In Kansas, it wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. It was a man named Silas Brand's cousin. Ingrid froze. I didn't know it then. Cole said, I found out later. The man who works for Brand now, the one with the scar who laughed in court. That is Garrett, the dead man's brother. Ingrid felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. This isn't just about land, she whispered. No, Cole said. Brand wants the water. But he hired Garrett because Garrett wants me dead. And now you are in the middle of a blood feud. Ingrid looked at the shotgun in her lap. She hated that her love for this man was tied to this danger. She hated that violence was the currency they had to trade in. But looking at Cole, broken and bleeding in the dirt, she realized something else. He understands. She thought, he knows what it is to be defined by the worst thing that ever happened to you. We are not victims. Cole, she said firmly, not tonight. They walked back to town at dawn. It took 4 hours. Cole's shoulder was agony, his face gray with pain. Ingrid carried the shotgun and supported him every step of the way. When they reached the edge of town, Sheriff Harlan was waiting. He stood on the boardwalk in front of his office, flanked by 2 deputies. It was as if he knew they were coming. Cole Mercer, Harlan shouted. Cole straightened up, trying to hide his injury. What do you want? Harlan? I have a warrant, Harlan said, pulling a paper from his vest. Issued this morning by the territorial magistrate. For the murder of Archibald Brand. State of Kansas, 1878. That was war, Cole said. Or close enough to it. The law calls it murder. Harlan said, arrest him. The deputies moved in. Ingrid raised the shotgun, but Cole put his hand on the barrel and pushed it down. No, Ingrid, he said. Not here, not like this. They grabbed Cole. He groaned as they wrenched his bad arm behind his back. They shackled him. Ingrid stood alone in the street. The townspeople were watching from windows and doorways. They saw the giant woman, covered in dust and blood, standing by as her man was dragged away. Go to Marion's, Cole shouted over his shoulder as they shoved him toward the jailhouse door. Do not go back to the claim. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Ingrid stood there. For a moment, the old urge to shrink, to hide, to apologize for taking up space, washed over her. She saw the faces of the town, some pitying, most turning away because they didn't want to catch the bad luck. But she did not shrink. She walked to the jailhouse window. She put her hand on the glass. I am not leaving, she said to the glass. To the town, to the indifferent sky. Marion Locke took her in. She drew a hot bath, gave Ingrid clean clothes that were too short but clean, and fed her soup. You cannot go near that jail, Marion said, pouring tea with a steady hand. Harlan will lock you up too if you give him a reason. I have to get him out, Ingrid said. You need leverage, Marion said. And right now, you have none. That evening, a note arrived. It was from Brand. Dinner. The Grand Hotel. 8 o'clock. We can discuss Mr. Mercer's future. Ingrid went. She wore her cleanest dress. She walked into the dining room of the hotel, ignoring the stairs. Brand was sitting at a corner table. Please, sit, Brand said. Let him go, Ingrid said, remaining standing. Brand sighed. He gestured to the chair. He killed my cousin, Miss Halverson. Justice must be served. You don't care about your cousin, Ingrid said. You care about the creek. Brand smiled. He appreciated directness. Perhaps. Here's the deal. You sign the quitclaim deed tonight. You agree to a quiet civil ceremony marrying me next week. In exchange, I will use my influence to have the charges against Mr. Mercer reconsidered. I will arrange for him to be exiled from the territory rather than hanged. Ingrid felt the room spin. It was the cage again. The gilded cage. She could save Cole, but only by selling herself to this man. It was the same choice she had faced a dozen times in her life, safety at the cost of her soul. She almost said yes. The terror of seeing Cole hang was a physical pain in her chest. But then she remembered the cabin. She remembered the way Cole had stopped when she whispered hurts. She remembered the promise always. If she did this, she would be betraying everything they had built. She would be saving his life by destroying the thing he loved. Her freedom. No, Ingrid said. Bran's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I said no, I will not marry you, and I will not sign. Then he hangs, Bran said coldly. If you hang him, Ingrid said, leaning across the table, her voice low and dangerous. I will burn your ranch to the ground. I will not need a match. I will find a way. She turned and walked out. She went back to Marion's. She was shaking, but her mind was racing. She needed a weapon. Not a gun. Bran had too many guns. She needed the truth. Marion, Ingrid said. Who washes the sheriff's laundry? Marion blinked. Sarah, the girl who works at the laundry behind the saloon. And who cleans Bran's office? Mrs. Higgins. I need to talk to them, Ingrid said. Tonight? Now. For the next 2 days, Ingrid Halvorsen became a specter. She moved through the back alleys and kitchens of the town. She used Marion's network, the invisible army of women who cleaned the floors, washed the sheets, and heard the drunken boasts of powerful men. Most were afraid to speak, but Ingrid was persistent. She offered them the gold coins from her shame pouch. I am fighting for my life, she told Sarah at the laundry. And I think he is stealing from you too. Sarah hesitated, then pulled a small ledger from under a pile of dirty sheets. I found this in Harlan's vest pocket, Sarah whispered. He forgot it. I was going to burn it, but the numbers didn't make sense. Ingrid took the book. She sat by the lamp in Marion's kitchen and deciphered the scribbles. It was a record, not of law enforcement, but of cattle. Brands altered. Water rights diverted. Payments made from Bran to Harlan for services rendered. Evictions, arrests, intimidation. It was proof. But proof in a book meant nothing if no one saw it. It was Friday night. The Golden Steer Saloon was packed. Miners, cowboys, drifters. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of stale beer. The batwing doors swung open. Ingrid Halvorsen stepped inside. She did not look at the floor. She did not hunch. She wore her borrowed dress like armor. She held a sheaf of papers in her hand, pages torn from the ledger. Along with affidavits Marion had helped her gather from 3 other terrified widows who had lost land to Brand. The piano player stopped. The room went quiet. A woman in a saloon was rare. A giant woman was a spectacle. Hey, tall girl, a drunk shouted. You looking for a dance partner? You'll have to hold me up. Laughter rippled through the room. Ingrid walked to the center of the room. She climbed onto a poker table. The wood creaked, but it held. She towered over them now. She was 7 feet above the floor. Listen to me, she shouted. The laughter died down, replaced by confused muttering. You laugh at me because I am big, Ingrid said. You laugh because I am strange. But while you are laughing, Silas Brand is picking your pockets. She threw the papers down onto the table. Sheriff Harlan is a thief, she announced. She pointed to a man in the crowd. A small rancher named Miller. Mr. Miller, you lost your water rights last month, yes? You were told the creek dried up. Miller nodded, looking nervous. It did not dry up, Ingrid yelled. Harlan blew the dam upstream. It is here, in his own book. He was paid $50 by Brand to starve you out. The room shifted. The amusement evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard tension. She pointed to another man. And you, Mr. Jensen, your cattle that went missing, they are running with Brand's herd right now. Harlan signed the bill of sale himself. Brand's men, who were drinking at the bar, pushed forward. Shut her up, one yelled. He reached for her ankle to pull her down. Ingrid kicked him. It was a mule kick, hard and precise. The man flew back into the bar. Read the papers, Ingrid screamed. If you are men, read them. She jumped down and pushed her way through the crowd. The seeds were sown. Men were picking up the papers, squinting at the numbers. The mood was turning from mockery to fury. She ran back to the boarding house where she had rented a room for the night. needing to be closer to the jail than Marion's house. She bolted the door. She was panting. She had done it. She had lit the fuse. But the explosion came for her first. The windows shattered. A man climbed through, masked, carrying a knife. It was an assassin, sent to silence the leak. Ingrid didn't scream. She grabbed the porcelain water pitcher from the washstand. The man lunged. Ingrid swung the pitcher. It smashed against his head, shattering into jagged shards. He staggered but slashed out, the knife catching her forearm. Pain flared, hot and sharp. Blood sprayed onto her dress. Ingrid roared. She grabbed the chair she'd been sitting on, a heavy oak piece. She lifted it as if it were made of balsa wood. She drove the legs of the chair into the man's chest, pinning him against the wall. She heard ribs crack. He dropped the knife. She dropped the chair and grabbed him by the throat. She squeezed. She saw the fear in his eyes, the realization that he was not fighting a victim, but a titan. "Tell Brand," she hissed, her face inches from his. "Tell him he missed." She threw him toward the window. He scrambled out, falling into the alleyway, running for his life. Ingrid stood in the center of the room, clutching her bleeding arm. The room was destroyed. She was bleeding. She was terrified, but she was alive. She grabbed a towel, wrapped her arm tight, and ran out the door. She headed for Marion's. As she ran through the dark streets, she realized the truth of the West. It wasn't about law. It wasn't about fairness. It was about living long enough to make them hear you. She reached Marion's porch and collapsed against the door, hammering with her good hand. Justice, she thought as the door opened and light spilled out, is just survival with a voice. And she was done being quiet. The cell in the basement of the sheriff's office was a box of damp stone and iron that smelled of wet straw and despair. Cole Mercer sat on the edge of the narrow cot, his hands hanging loosely between his knees. His shoulder, dislocated in the crash and popped back into place with brutal efficiency by the jailer, throbbed with a dull, sickening rhythm that matched his heartbeat. He had been there for 2 days. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ingrid standing in the street, blood on her arm, shouting at the glass. He saw the way the town looked at her, like a curiosity, a monster, a target. He knew Silas Brand. He knew the way the man's mind worked. Brand did not just want land, he wanted dominance. He would squeeze Ingrid until she broke. He would offer her Cole's life in exchange for her freedom. And the thought that Ingrid might take that deal, that she might sell herself to save a man like him, was a torture worse than any hanging. Cole stared at the sliver of light coming through the high, barred window. He would not beg. If Harlan came in here with a confession for him to sign, he would spit in the man's face. He had lived his life running from the sins of his past, but he would not die on his knees. He would hold on to his dignity, because it was the only thing he had left to offer Ingrid. If he died, he wanted her to remember him standing. Ingrid did not have time for despair. She was moving with the cold, focused energy of a woman who has realized she has nothing left to lose. Marion Locke paced the kitchen of her small house, wringing her hands in her apron. "It is suicide," Marion said. "The depot will be crawling with them. It is the only way," Ingrid said. She was wrapping the ledger and the affidavits in oilcloth, tying the bundle tight with twine. The rumor Marion had heard that morning was their only lifeline. A United States Marshal, a man named Davies, was passing through on the noon train, heading for Denver on Federal Railroad business. He was outside Harlan's jurisdiction. He was outside Brand's payroll. "But I have to get to him before the train leaves," Ingrid said. "And I have to get past Brand's men to do it." Marion looked at her. Ingrid wore her work boots and a heavy canvas coat she had borrowed from Marion's late husband's closet. She looked like a soldier. "I will create a distraction," Marion said, her voice trembling but determined. "No," Ingrid said. "You have done enough. I will not drag you down with me." She tucked the package inside her coat, against her ribs. "Ingrid," Marion said, grabbing her arm, "be careful. They will not hesitate to shoot." Ingrid looked down at the smaller woman. She touched the bandage on her own forearm where the assassin's knife had cut her. "Neither will I," Ingrid said. The train station was a chaotic churn of steam, shouting porters, and shifting freight. The noon whistle blew, a shrill scream that cut through the thick, coal-dusted air. Ingrid pulled her hat low and stepped onto the platform. She tried to hunch, to blend in, but it was impossible. She was a lighthouse in a sea of dinghies. She saw the marshal. He was standing near the first-class car, a tall man with a gray mustache and a bearing that suggested he did not tolerate foolishness. He was checking his pocket watch. She started toward him. "There!" The shout came from the loading dock. Ingrid turned. Two of Brand's hired guns, Garrett, the brother of the man Cole killed, and another man named Pike, were jumping down from a stack of crates. They had spotted her height instantly. "Get her," Garrett yelled. "Don't let her near the train." Ingrid did not freeze. The old Ingrid, the girl in the circus tent, would have frozen. The woman who had wintered on the line camp turned and ran. She did not run away. She ran toward the threat, angling for the gap between two baggage carts. Pike stepped in her way, drawing a pistol. He grinned, expecting her to stop. Ingrid did not break stride. She was 6 feet 4 inches of momentum. She dropped her shoulder and slammed into him. It was like a locomotive hitting a deer. Pike flew backward, the air leaving his lungs in a wet whoosh. He crashed into a stack of luggage, his gun skittering across the planks. Ingrid kept moving. Her size, the thing she had cursed for 20 years, was suddenly her greatest weapon. She did not have to go around the obstacles. She could go through them. Garrett was chasing her, shoving people aside. "Stop!" Garrett screamed. "Stop or I drop you!" Ingrid ducked behind a high pile of wool bales just as a bullet splintered the wood near her ear. The crowd on the platform screamed and scattered. Panic erupted. Ingrid used the chaos. She wove through the screaming passengers, her long legs eating up the distance. She saw the marshal turn, his hand going to the gun at his hip, alerted by the gunfire. Ingrid vaulted over a crate of chickens, landing heavy but solid. She was 10 yards away. Garrett rounded the corner, leveling his revolver. Ingrid grabbed a heavy iron pry bar leaning against a support post. She didn't have time to aim. She hurled it. The iron bar spun through the air and struck Garrett in the shin. He howled, stumbling and firing his shot into the station roof. Ingrid reached the marshal. She slammed into him, breathless, wild-eyed. "Marshal Davies!" she gasped. The marshal had his gun drawn, pointed at her chest. "Back off!" he barked. Ingrid reached into her coat. The marshal's finger tightened on the trigger. She pulled out the oilcloth bundle and shoved it against his chest. "Take it!" she yelled. "Read it!" "It is the proof." "Proof of what?" the marshal demanded, looking from her to the man writhing on the ground. "Corruption!" Ingrid shouted over the noise of the hissing steam. "Theft! Murder! Sheriff Harlan and Silas Brand. It is all there. The cattle brands. The water rights." Garrett was trying to stand up, reloading his pistol. "Marshal!" Garrett yelled. "That woman is a fugitive. She is dangerous." The marshal looked at Garrett, then at the frantic woman towering over him. He felt the weight of the ledger in his hand. He looked into Ingrid's eyes. He saw terror there, yes, but he also saw a ferocious, undeniable truth. He lowered his gun. "Stand down!" the marshal bellowed at Garrett, his voice booming with authority. "I am a federal officer. Drop that weapon or I will put you down." Garrett hesitated. He looked at the star on the marshal's chest. He looked at the crowd watching. He spat on the ground, holstered his gun, and limped away into the smoke. The marshal looked at Ingrid. He opened the oilcloth. He flipped through the pages, seeing the columns of altered numbers, the signatures. "This is serious." "Miss," the marshal said, his face hardening, "if this is authentic, half the lawmen in this county are going to prison." "It is real," Ingrid said, her chest heaving. The marshal looked at her. "You understand what you have done. You have started a war. They will come for you. It will turn violent." Ingrid straightened her coat. She wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek. She looked at the blood on the platform where Pike had fallen. "Mr. Marshal," she said, her voice dropping to a register of absolute calm. My life has been violent since the day I was born. People have pushed me, poked me, and hunted me. I am done being quiet. I am done hiding. Let them come." Silas Brand did not wait for the law. When words reached him that the ledger was in federal hands, he knew the legal game was over. He switched tactics instantly. If he could not own the land by paper, he would scorch it so that no one could have it. He sent riders. Ingrid saw the dust cloud from the edge of town. She knew where they were going. She did not go to the sheriff. She went to the livery stable. She saddled her horse with fast, efficient movements. Marion Locke appeared at the stable door. Behind her were 3 men: Miller, Jensen, and a young homesteader named Aris, whose barn had been burned the month before. They carried Winchester rifles and grim expressions. "You are not going alone," Marion said. "We're tired of being picked off one by one," Miller said, checking the action on his rifle. "If they take the Rourke claim today, they take mine tomorrow." Ingrid looked at them. For months, she had been the outcast. Now, she was the captain. "Ride hard," Ingrid said. They thundered out of town, a ragtag cavalry racing against destruction. When they crested the ridge overlooking the creek, smoke was already rising. Brand's men were there. They had tied ropes to the porch of the cabin and were using horses to pull the supports down. A fire had been set in the lean-to. Ingrid felt a scream build in her throat, but she swallowed it. Grief was a luxury she could not afford. That cabin was the only home where she had ever felt safe. It was the place where Cole had warmed her gloves. It was the place where she had learned to bake bread. It was the proof that a gentle life was possible, and they were erasing it. "Spread out," Ingrid shouted to her small band. "Fire over their heads! Drive them off!" She spurred her horse down the slope. She raised the shotgun she had carried since the ambush. She fired into the air. "Get away from there!" she roared. The Brand riders, surprised by the resistance, scrambled for cover. Bullets whizzed past Ingrid, snapping like angry insects. She did not flinch. She rode straight for the fire. She jumped from her horse and grabbed a shovel leaning against the trough. She began throwing dirt onto the flames, licking up the side of the cabin logs. "Water!" she yelled. "Get the buckets!" Miller and Jensen dismounted and opened fire on the riders, providing cover. Marion ran to the creek. Ingrid fought the fire. The heat seared her face. Her eyes watered. She shoveled with a mechanical fury, her muscles straining. She watched the flames catch the roof. She saw the shingles curl and blacken. It was no use. The wood was too old, too dry. The fire climbed faster than she could fight it. The roof groaned. Sparks showered down. Ingrid stood back, her chest heaving, her face streaked with soot and tears. She watched the cabin, her sanctuary, turn into a skeleton of orange fire against the blue sky. She felt a hollowness open inside her. They had taken it. They had taken the wood and the stone. But as she looked around at her neighbors firing back at the tree line, defending the patch of scorched earth she stood on, she realized something. They could burn the house, but they could not burn the claim. And they could not burn her. The grief turned sharp. It crystallized into a cold, diamond-hard rage. She turned to the ridge. "Keep firing," she ordered. "Do not let them cross the creek." The standoff lasted an hour. Then, a bugle sounded. Not the cavalry, but close enough. Marshal Davies rode over the hill, flanked by 4 deputies and, surprisingly, Sheriff Harlan, who looked pale and was riding with his hands tied to his saddle horn. "Cease fire!" the marshal shouted. Brand's men in the trees hesitated, then lowered their guns. They saw the federal badges. They saw the sheriff in custody. The game changed. Silas Brand himself rode out from the tree line. He was dressed immaculately, as if he were attending a garden party, though his horse was lathered. "Marshal," Brand called out, his voice smooth but tight. "You are interfering in a private dispute. These squatters are trespassing." The marshal rode down to the creek, his horse splashing through the water. He pulled his horse up in front of Ingrid. He looked at the burning cabin, then at Brand. "I have read the ledger, Brand," the marshal said, "and I have heard the testimony of your sheriff here. He was quite talkative once we explained the federal penitentiary term for conspiracy. Brand's face twitched. "It is slander. It is evidence," the marshal said. "You are under arrest, Mr. Brand, for fraud, racketeering, and attempted murder." Brand looked around. He saw his men backing away. He saw the homesteaders aiming rifles at him. He saw his power evaporating like mist. He looked at Ingrid. She was standing amidst the ashes of her home, soot-covered, holding a shovel like a spear. She looked magnificent and terrifying. Brand snapped. The veneer of the gentleman cracked, revealing the vicious animal beneath. He spurred his horse forward, ignoring the marshal. He rode straight at Ingrid. "You think you win," Brand screamed. "You are nothing. You are a freak, an investment I should have made." He reached down as he galloped past, grabbing her arm. He meant to drag her, to trample her, to break her one last time. Ingrid did not pull away. She planted her feet in the mud. She locked her arm. She was 6 feet 4 inches of labor-hardened muscle. She was an anchor. Brand's horse jerked. Brand was ripped from his saddle. He hung in the air for a second, suspended by his grip on her arm, before Ingrid yanked him down. She spun him around. She did not slap him. She did not scratch. She balled her large, capable hand into a fist and drove it into his jaw. It was a punch thrown with 24 years of suppressed anger. It was for the circus tent. It was for the stairs. It was for the cabin. It was for Cole. Brand hit the ground like a sack of wet grain. He did not get up. Ingrid stood over him, rubbing her knuckles. "I am not your investment," she said to his unconscious form. The marshal whistled low. "Remind me never to make you angry, Miss Halverson," he said. "Where is Cole?" Ingrid asked. Turning to the marshal, "He is being transported," the marshal said. "I sent 2 of my best men to intercept the wagon from the jail. They should be here shortly. But the road was dangerous, and Brand had backup plans. 3 miles away, on the canyon road, the transport wagon carrying Cole had been ambushed, not by lawmen, but by the last of Brand's loyalists trying to erase the witness. Cole was shackled in the back. He heard the shots. He felt the wagon lurch. He kicked the door open. He saw the driver dead. He saw Garrett, limping but armed, aiming a rifle at him. End of the line. "Mercer!" Garrett yelled. Cole couldn't dive. He couldn't run. He stood up in the wagon, chains rattling. "Then look me in the eye when you do it," Cole said. Garrett tightened his finger. A shot rang out. Garrett's hat flew off. He spun around. 2 federal deputies came galloping around the bend, repeating rifles blazing. Garrett returned fire, diving behind a rock. The skirmish was short, sharp, and violent. When the dust settled, Garrett was gone, slipping away into the Badlands, and the deputies were cutting Cole's chains. "You Mercer?" one deputy asked. "Yeah, you have a lady friend who is very persistent." The deputy grinned. "Let's get you home." Cole stumbled into the clearing just as the sun was setting. He saw the smoke first, the black column rising into the still air. His heart stopped. He thought he was too late. He thought he would find her body among the ruins. Then he saw her. She was standing by the corral, wiping down a horse. She was covered in black soot. Her dress was torn. Her hair was wild. "Ingrid!" She turned. She dropped the rag. She ran. She did not run delicately. She thundered across the ground. Cole met her halfway. They collided. It was not a movie embrace. It was a crash. Cole groaned as his bad shoulder took the impact, but he didn't care. He wrapped his arms around her waist, burying his face in her neck. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders, pulling him down, lifting him up. They held each other with a desperate, crushing strength. They were checking for broken bones, for bullet holes, for reality. "You are alive," she sobbed into his coat. "You are alive. They burned it." "Cole," she said, pulling back to look at him. "They burned the cabin?" Cole looked over her shoulder at the smoldering pile of logs. He looked at the devastation. Then he looked back at her face, smeared with ash and tears. Alive and fierce. "Let it burn," Cole whispered. "It was just wood. You are here. We are here." He kissed her. It tasted of smoke and salt and survival. It was the kiss of two people who had stood on the edge of the abyss and refused to fall in. They did not go back to town. They could not leave the claim. If they left, scavengers might come. They set up a camp near the creek, under the open sky. They laid out bedrolls on the ground, sheltered by the willows. The night was quiet. The violence of the day had drained away, leaving a strange, exhausted peace. They lay side by side under the stars. The sky was torn with clouds, revealing patches of brilliant, cold light. Ingrid turned to him. She reached out and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "Just old hurts," he said. "And you?" "My knuckles are bruised," she said. "I punched Silas Brand." Cole laughed, a genuine, wheezing laugh that hurt his ribs. God, I wish I'd seen that. They fell silent. The intimacy between them shifted. It wasn't just relief anymore. It was need. Ingrid moved closer. She pressed her body against his. "Cole," she whispered. "I am here. Make me forget the fire," she said. "Make me forget the noise." Cole shifted, rising on one elbow. He looked down at her. In the starlight, she wasn't a giant. She wasn't a spectacle. She was a landscape he wanted to learn by heart. He kissed her throat. He moved slowly. He waited for her breath to hitch, for her hands to guide him. Ingrid's hands moved over his back, feeling the scars, the muscles. She felt the power in him, but she also felt the restraint. He paused when she tensed, waited until she relaxed, and then continued. It was a slow, deliberate reclaiming of their bodies. After a day of violence, this was an act of creation. It was soft where the world was hard. It was quiet where the world was loud. Later, as they lay tangled together under the blankets, the creek bubbling nearby, Ingrid rested her head on his chest. "I'm afraid," she admitted into the dark. "Of what?" Cole asked, stroking her hair. "That loving you makes me weak," she said. "Before, when I was alone, I had nothing to lose. I could be hard. Today when I thought you were dead, I wanted to die too. That is a weakness." Cole was silent for a moment. He watched a shooting star burn out overhead. "I used to think that too," he said. "I thought being alone made me strong. I thought if I didn't care about anything, nothing could hurt me." He tightened his arm around her. "But I wasn't strong. Ingrid, I was just empty. And it is easy to be empty. It is hard to be full." He kissed the top of her head. "Love doesn't make you weak. It's the only thing that ever made me try to be better. It's the reason I didn't kill Harlan today. It's the reason you fought Brand. It gives us something to defend." Ingrid closed her eyes. She felt the warmth of him. She felt the solid ground beneath her. She realized he was right. She wasn't weaker. She was just heavier, anchored to the earth by something that mattered. The next few days were a revelation. The town, once united in its mockery, fractured. Many still whispered. They called Ingrid a troublemaker, a witch who had bewitched the cowboy and brought the federal government down on their heads. They crossed the street when she walked by, but others changed. Mr. Miller rode out with a wagon of lumber. "It isn't much," Miller said, kicking the wood off the back. "But it's seasoned pine, good for framing. Mrs. Jensen brought a basket of eggs and a quilt. Marianlock brought nails and tools. They didn't say much. They didn't apologize for the past. But the gifts were an acknowledgement. You stood up. You fought for us. We see you." It was a small glimmer of hope. It was not acceptance, not fully, but it was respect. And for Ingrid, that was enough. Marshal Davies came to the camp 3 days later. "Brand is in custody in the territorial prison," Davies said. "The trial is set for next month. It will be the biggest spectacle the territory has ever seen." "And until then," Cole asked. "Until then, he is dangerous," Davies warned. "He has lawyers. He has money buried where we can't find it. He is already sending messages. He is desperate, and a desperate man is a cornered rat." He looked at the pile of lumber where they were starting to rebuild. "Watch your backs," the marshal said. "This isn't over. He will try one last thing to kill the case. Or to kill you." Ingrid looked at the frame of the new cabin rising from the ashes. She handed Cole a hammer. "Let him try," she said. "We are not going anywhere." Cole took the hammer. He looked at her, tall, strong, her hands rough from work, her eyes clear. "No," he said. "We are home." He drove the nail into the wood with a single, ringing blow. The summer heat descended on the territory like a heavy wool blanket that no one could shake off. It was July, and the high plains shimmered in a distortion of heat waves that made the distant mountains look like they were melting into the sky. The creek ran low and sluggish, the mud cracking into geometric patterns along the banks. The air was thick with the sound of cicadas, a relentless, sawing drone that grated on the nerves. Tension lay over the county seat, heavier than the heat. It was in the way men looked at each other on the boardwalk, hands hovering near waistbands. It was in the way women hurried their children indoors when a rider passed. Everyone knew that the reckoning was coming. The law, which had been a fluid, purchasable thing for so long, had finally hardened into something sharp. And Silas Brand was not a man to let go of the reins without breaking the horse's jaw. The courthouse was packed an hour before the gavel fell. The room smelled of unwashed bodies, stale tobacco, and anxiety. On the left side of the aisle sat Brand's allies, cattlemen with silver spurs and hired guns, who looked bored and dangerous. On the right sat the homesteaders, the small-time ranchers, and the women. The women watched with a particular intensity. They sat with their hands folded in their laps, their faces stony, waiting to see if a woman could stand up in this room and speak without being destroyed. Ingrid Halvorsen sat at the defense table. She wore a simple gray dress that Marion Locke had helped her sew. It fit her shoulders. She did not hunch. She sat with her spine straight, her hands resting on the table, still and composed. Cole Mercer sat beside her, his face a mask of granite, his eyes scanning the room, marking the exits, marking the threats. Judge Stone banged his gavel, and the sound was like a gunshot in the stifling room. Mr. Galt, Brand's lawyer, began with the theatrics of a revival preacher. He paced the floor, mopping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. He painted a picture of chaos. He described the burning of the cabin not as a crime by Brand, but as the inevitable result of vagrancy and disorder. He called Ingrid a disruption to the peace, a woman whose very presence incited unrest. When it was Ingrid's turn to take the stand, the silence in the room was absolute. She walked to the chair. It creaked under her weight. She sat, her knees pressing against the wooden rail. "Miss Halvorsen," Galt said, approaching her with a sneer he didn't bother to hide. "Let us be plain. You are not a wife. You are not a widow. You are a woman living in the wilderness with a man to whom you are not wed. In the eyes of this community, what does that make you?" "It makes me a survivor," Ingrid said. Her voice was low, rolling through the room like thunder in a canyon. Galt chuckled. "A survivor, or perhaps something else. You are a woman of unusual physical attributes. Is it not true that you rely on Mr. Mercer not for protection, but because no proper, decent man would take on a woman of your size without peculiar incentives?" The insinuation hung in the hot air, ugly and poisonous. He was calling her a freak and a whore in the polite language of the court. Cole half rose from his chair, his hands gripping the table edge until the wood groaned. Ingrid caught his eye. She shook her head. "Just once. Sit." Ingrid turned back to Galt. Her cheeks burned with the old shame, the heat rising from her neck to her hairline. She remembered the carnival. She remembered the laughter. But she looked at the faces in the crowd, the women watching her, and she realized that her shame was the weapon Galt was using to silence her. If she refused to pick it up, he had nothing. "Mr. Galt," Ingrid said. Her voice shook. Not from weakness, but from the force of the truth pushing its way out. "You try to make me small by mocking how big I am. You try to make me dirty by implying my life is a sin." She looked up at the judge, then out at the gallery. "I am 6 feet and 4 inches tall. I can lift a wagon wheel. I can plow a field. My body is strong. It is not a public property for you to discuss. It is not a sideshow." She paused, taking a breath that filled her powerful lungs. And my fear is not an invitation. Just because I'm a woman alone does not mean I'm available to be taken, or beaten, or cheated. My size is not consent. I am a legal person. I have a name, and I have a claim to the land I have bled for. Some of the women in the gallery nodded. One openly wiped a tear. Galt looked flustered, his rhythm broken by her dignity. Cole took the stand next. He did not wear a suit. He wore his trail clothes, clean but worn. He sat with the weary heaviness of a man who has ridden too many miles. "Mr. Mercer," Galt barked. "Is it true you are a wanted man, a killer?" "I was," Cole said calmly. He looked at the jury. "I rode with a bad crowd after the war. I stole cattle. I killed a man in Kansas during a fight I should not have been in. I have never denied it." He pointed at Silas Brand, who sat rigid at the plaintiff's table. "That is how I know what Mr. Brand is doing," Cole said. "Because I know how thieves think. I know how men justify taking what isn't theirs. They call it business. They call it expansion, but it is just theft." Cole leaned forward. "I paid for my sins with years of looking over my shoulder. I am done running. Mr. Brand thinks he can buy the law, but he cannot buy the truth. And the truth is that he burned a woman's home because she was strong enough to tell him no." The doors at the back of the room opened. Marshal Davies walked in. He carried the ledger. The air in the room shifted. It was the moment the tide turns. The marshal took the stand. He did not use flowery language. He used numbers. He opened the book and read the dates. He read the amounts paid to Sheriff Harlan. He read the altered cattle brand registrations. Sheriff Harlan, sitting in the front row, began to sweat. He looked at Brand. Brand looked straight ahead, his face a mask of fury. Under cross-examination, Harlan crumbled. He was a bully, not a mastermind. When the marshal produced a letter Harlan had written demanding more money for removing the squatter, Harlan started shouting that he was just following orders, pointing a shaking finger at Brand. The lie unraveled. It didn't break apart slowly. It collapsed all at once, leaving the ugly machinery of corruption exposed for everyone to see. "Order!" Judge Stone shouted, banging his gavel as the room erupted into shouting. "Order in this court!" Silas Brand stood up. He did not look at the judge. He looked at his men scattered through the room. He gave a sharp nod. It happened fast. Panic is a contagion, and it swept through the courtroom in a heartbeat. Brand's men drew their coats back, revealing pistols. The marshal's deputies drew their weapons. "Clear the room," Davies shouted. Brand moved. He didn't go for a gun. He went for the side exit, a door that led to the alley where horses were waiting. "Stop him!" Cole yelled. The courtroom exploded into chaos. People screamed and shoved toward the main doors. Dust rose from the floorboards, choking the air. Ingrid was caught in the crush. A woman, Mrs. Jensen, fell in front of her. A man in a heavy coat stepped on the woman's skirt, trying to climb over her. Ingrid grabbed the man by the collar and hurled him back. She reached down and hauled Mrs. Jensen to her feet. "Move!" Ingrid commanded. "Go to the wall!" She looked for Marion. She saw the midwife pressed against the jury box. Terrified, Ingrid waded through the stream of bodies. Using her elbows, using her strength, she reached Marion and shielded her with her own body, pressing her into the corner. "Stay down!" Ingrid yelled over the noise. Outside, a gunshot cracked. Then another. Cole had vaulted the railing. He ran for the side door, chasing Brand. He burst out into the blinding sunlight of the alley. Brand was there, trying to mount a nervous horse. But between Cole and Brand stood a man, Garrett, the brother of the man Cole had killed in Kansas, the man who had hunted them for months. He had slipped back into town, a ghost waiting for his moment. Garrett stood in the dust, his gun drawn but held low. He looked gaunt, his eyes burning with a feverish hate. "Mercer," Garrett hissed. Brand kicked his horse and galloped away down the alley, heading for the open plains. Cole didn't look at Brand. He looked at Garrett. "Get out of the way." "Garrett," Cole said. "It is over. It ain't over till one of us is dead," Garrett said. "You killed my blood. It was a war," Cole said. We were all wrong. I am sorry for your brother. Truly. But I am not going to let you kill me for it. And I am not going to kill you if I don't have to." Cole holstered his gun. He held his hands out, palms open. "Walk away," Cole said. "Don't die for a man like Brand. He left you here. He ran." Garrett blinked. He looked at Brand's dust settling in the distance. He looked at Cole's empty hands. For a second, the cycle of violence seemed to pause. Then Garrett's face twisted. The hate was too deep. It was all he had. "No!" Garrett screamed. He raised his gun. Cole moved. It was instinct, honed by years of survival. He didn't want to do it. He hated that he had to do it. He drew. The two shots sounded almost as one. Bang, bang! A puff of dust erupted from Cole's jacket sleeve. Garrett jerked backward. He dropped his gun. He fell into the dirt, clutching his chest. Cole stood there, his smoking gun in his hand. He didn't feel triumph. He felt a sick, heavy weight in his stomach. It was ugly. It was fast. It was final. He walked over to Garrett. The man was looking up at the sky, his eyes glazing over. "Damn it," Cole whispered. Marshal Davies and his deputies came running into the alley. They saw the body. They saw Cole. "Go!" Davies shouted, pointing to a horse tied to the hitching rail. "Brand is heading for the canyon road. Go!" Cole mounted the horse. He winced. Garrett's bullet had grazed his arm. But he turned the horse and spurred it into a gallop. The chase did not last long. Brand was a businessman, not a rider. He pushed his horse too hard in the heat. 2 miles out of town, the horse stumbled and threw him. When Cole arrived, Brand was limping across the scrub, holding a Derringer pistol. Cole rode him down. He didn't shoot. He rode past and kicked the pistol from Brand's hand. Brand fell in the sagebrush. He looked up, expecting death. He saw Cole Mercer looking down at him with cold contempt. "Get up," Cole said. Brand scrambled back. "You can't kill me. I'm a wealthy man. I'm not going to kill you." Cole said, "That would be too easy." He leaned down and grabbed Brand by the collar. He dragged him back toward the road where the marshal's posse was approaching. "You are going to prison. Silas, you are going to wear chains. You are going to break rocks. And every day, you are going to remember that you lost everything to a cowboy and a mail-order bride." The arrest of Silas Brand broke the spell that had held the county in fear for a decade. When the marshal marched him down the main street in irons, the town watched in silence. They saw the man who had owned the judges and the water rights reduced to a dusty, disheveled prisoner. They saw Sheriff Harlan being stripped of his badge, weeping like a child. It was a shock. It showed them how small tyrants really are when the fear is taken away. Ingrid stood on the steps of the courthouse. Her dress was torn, her hair coming loose. She watched the procession. Marshal Davies stopped in front of her. "The claim is yours." "Miss Halverson," he said, "Judge Stone has signed the order. The Rourke land belongs to you, legal and clear." "Thank you," Ingrid said. She looked for Cole. He was standing by the livery stable, holding his arm. She walked to him. She didn't run this time. She walked with the steady, ground-eating stride of a woman who owns the earth beneath her feet. She reached him. She touched the blood on his sleeve. "Is it bad?" she asked. "Just a scratch," Cole said. "And Garrett?" Cole looked away. The shadow was back in his eyes. "He gave me no choice," Cole said softly. "I know," Ingrid said. She took his hand. "But it is done. The debt is paid. Victory in the West was never clean. There were no parades. There was only the work that waited." They rode back to the claim the next day. The ashes of the cabin were cold now, a black scar on the green grass near the creek. The corral was splintered. The silence was heavy. They stood amidst the ruin. It was daunting. They had nothing but the land in their hands, but as they stood there, a wagon rattled over the hill. Then another. It was Marion Locke and Mr. Miller and the Jensens. They brought tools. They brought a tent. They brought food. "We figured you folks might need a hand raising a roof," Miller said, looking at his boots, embarrassed by his own kindness. Ingrid looked at them. She felt a lump in her throat that was harder to swallow than any insult. "Thank you," she whispered. They worked. The summer heat did not break, but the work made it bearable. They cleared the char. They cut new logs. They built a temporary shelter. The scars remained. Ingrid still woke up at night listening for hoofbeats. Cole still sat with his back to the wall, checking his gun. The town still murmured. Prejudice did not vanish just because the law had spoken. There were still people who crossed the street to avoid the giantess and her gunmen. But the landscape felt different. It was harsh. Yes, it was indifferent. But it was no longer an enemy. It was just a place. And it was their place. August brought a cooling wind from the north. The frame of the new cabin was up, larger this time, with higher doorways. One evening, as the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and violet, Ingrid and Cole walked down to the creek. The water was clear again, bubbling over the stones. Ingrid stopped. She turned to Cole. Cole stopped and looked at her. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "We have a roof," Ingrid said. "We have the papers." "Yes," Cole said. "But we do not have a name for what we are," Ingrid said. Cole watched her. "What do you want us to be?" "Ingrid." Ingrid took a breath. She reached out and took his hands. His palms were rough, calloused, familiar. "I do not need a husband to protect me," she said. "I proved that, and I do not need a man to give me a name. I have my own." She looked him in the eye. "But I want a witness. Cole, I want someone to see me. And I want to see you. I want to wake up every morning and know that you are there, not because you have to be, but because you chose to be." She squeezed his hands. "Marry me, Cole. Not for the law, not for the town, for us." Cole stared at her. His eyes filled with tears. He didn't try to hide them. He didn't wipe them away. He let them fall, cutting tracks through the dust on his face. He had spent his life believing he was unworthy of a home. He believed he was a man made for leaving. And here was this woman, this magnificent, towering, terrifying woman, planting him in the earth like a tree. "I have nothing to give you," Cole whispered. "Just a saddle and a bad past? You gave me my pride?" Ingrid said. "That is enough." "Then yes," Cole said. His voice cracked. "Yes, I choose you." They were married a week later by the circuit preacher. Standing in the frame of their unfinished house, Marion stood as witness. It was simple. It was quiet. That night, in the tent they were using until the roof was finished, the intimacy was different. It was not frantic. It was not a refuge from fear. It was a language. Ingrid lay back on the quilts, looking up at Cole. She did not dim the lantern. She wanted him to see her. All of her. The length of her limbs, the width of her hips, the scars on her arm, the size of her hands. She learned that she could ask, "Touch me here," she whispered. And Cole learned that tenderness did not make him weak. He touched her with a reverence that was almost holy. He learned to listen to the small changes in her breath. He learned that when she stiffened, it wasn't rejection, it was an old ghost passing through, and if he paused, if he waited, the ghost would leave and she would return. They healed each other, not by fixing the broken parts, but by loving the cracks. September came. The aspens in the high country turned to gold, shivering in the wind. News came from the capital. Silas Brand had been convicted. He was sentenced to 20 years in the federal penitentiary. The power of the cattle barons was waning, chipped away by fences and laws and people who refused to move. But the West was still the West. It was unforgiving. Winters would still be brutal. Wolves would still come. There would be droughts and blizzards and hard years. Ingrid and Cole stood on the porch of their finished cabin. The smell of pine resin and wood smoke was in the air. Ingrid watched the sun dip below the horizon. The shadow of the mountains stretched out to touch them. She felt Cole's hand slide into hers. He didn't grip her hard. He just held on. She looked at their hands, his, scarred and brown, hers, large and capable. They were small against the vastness of the plains. They were insignificant against the timeline of the rocks. But they were there. "Ready for winter?" Cole asked softly. Ingrid looked at the stack of firewood. She looked at the smoke curling from their chimney. She looked at the man beside her. "Let it come," she said. She squeezed his hand. "We are ready." They stood there as the light failed, two silhouettes against the darkening sky, choosing each other, again and again, in the face of the encroaching night. Thank you for listening to First Kiss Hurts. It has been a journey through the dust, the fear, and the hard-won redemption of Ingrid and Cole. I hope their story of finding dignity and love in a harsh world resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you in the city, the country, or somewhere across the ocean? Please leave a comment below and tell me your location. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to From Wild West for more tales of the frontier, where love is as tough as the land itself. And finally, I invite you to share your thoughts in English. What did you think of Ingrid's choice? Did the ending feel earned to you? I read every comment and cherish your insights. Until the next time, keep your fires lit and your powder dry.